City of Dallas. I wish to thank the leadership of the City of Dallas, City Manager T.C. Broadnax and his team of executives, Mayor Eric Johnson, and the entire Dallas City Council. I'm new to the City of Dallas, but not working in municipal settings. For the past 3 years, this program has taken place in person in a traditional format. So we thank you for joining us today online as we present the 4th year of the symposium. The business case focuses on how businesses of all sizes look at climate impacts to their bottom line and operations, supply chain resources, and many other aspects of their work. We are so honored today to have a very distinguished slate of well-known speakers and panelists for our symposium. They'll provide remarkable insight into the business case, how to plan, mitigate, adapt, and look ahead, all while keeping an eye on the climate. We will be recording the entire program for archival purposes. There are a few ground rules I want to cover. This program is being live streamed at dallascityhall.com or on Spectrum Cable at channel 16 or on AT&T Uverse at channel 99, live on City of Dallas YouTube and with Spanish closed captions at bit.ly/City of Dallas TV, and then go ahead and select channel 96. Please enter your questions into the Q&A feature in WebEx, and we will strive to address them during each of the program segments as time allows. The Q&A feature is being actively monitored. To the presenters, I just ask you keep your answers as succinct as possible. And now it is my distinct pleasure to begin with the introduction of Councilmember Omar Narvaez. He enthusiastically represents District 6 here in Dallas. Councilmember Narvaez and his family have lived in this district for 80 years. His dedication to the residents, businesses, and all sectors of the community is evident in his tireless efforts and list of achievements. Councilmember Narvaez serves as the chair of our Environment and Sustainability Committee, which was created by Mayor Eric Johnson in November of 2019. He's also appointed and active with the Economic Development Committee, Government Performance and Financial Management Committee, the Quality of Life and Arts and Culture Committee, as well as the Judicial Nominations Ad Hoc Committee. Please welcome Councilmember Omar Narvaez as he speaks about climate leadership action.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gagne, and welcome everybody to our 4th annual symposium. Once again, my name is Omar Narvaez, and I do serve as the chair of the Environment and Sustainability Task Force. And I'm extremely honored to be here with you all today. Unfortunately, we're still virtual, but we need to make sure that we continue to do what is necessary so that we can end this pandemic. The light is at the end of the tunnel, and I can tell you that even in our CCAP plan, which is it's almost 1 year old to the day that we passed it, which is one of my proudest achievements of getting a unanimous vote on our CCAP plan, so that we can start to make sure that climate change and our other issues that we need to deal with are taken care of. Even in there, we have issues that deal with public health. What I can tell you is over the last year that we have discovered that the things that we put into the CCAP were essential. What I can also tell you is that our eyes were opened even wider to the things that we needed to do in order to implement further and more quickly. The pandemic really proved some of the shortfalls that are happening, not just in our community, but across the entire nation. So with that, once again, my name is Omar Narvaez. Again, this should be a fun-filled information gathering and sharing moment for the next 4 hours. And I'm excited to be here with you all, and can't wait to hear from our featured guests and our different panelists, as well as hear from you out in the virtual world by sharing your questions with us so that we can make sure that we try to get to them and get them answered. With that, I am done with my portion, and I'm turning it over to AT&T at this point, I believe, or Mr. Gagne. I'm not sure. It didn't tell me who to bounce it back to. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Narvaez. Thank you very much, Councilmember Narvaez. It's now a pleasure to welcome AT&T to our symposium today. And we have a very distinguished speaker with us, Mr. Shannon Carroll. We are honored he has joined us. When it comes to corporate sustainability pledges, AT&T has set the bar pretty high. One of the main points you will hear about today from Shannon is that AT&T will be carbon neutral by 2035. The mitigation is underway. Shannon is the Director of Global Environmental Sustainability for AT&T. He's responsible for implementing sustainable business strategies throughout the company. He has been with AT&T for more than 20 years and has worked as a sustainable professional for the last 10 years. In that time, he has covered a broad range of social and environmental issues, including climate change mitigation strategies, climate resiliency, renewable energy, conflict minerals, human rights, greenhouse gas accounting, waste, and water. Shannon has a bachelor's degree in business and has completed graduate work in sustainability and environmental management. Now I'll give the event over to Mr. Shannon Carroll, and welcome to the symposium, Shannon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I believe we might have a nice video to run just before we get into the actual slides in the presentation.
Yes, sir. We'll pull that up now.
As extreme weather like the unprecedented wildfires raging across the West Coast and stronger hurricanes coming in the Gulf of Mexico tied to climate change become increasingly common, it could impact our ability to keep our customers connected. That's why we're committed to being part of the solution. We're taking action, addressing the environmental impact of our operations to help slow the speed of climate change.
Today, we're announcing a commitment to go carbon neutral across our entire global operations by 2035. That means AT&T will on balance have net zero Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions, which scientists say is critical to slowing climate change. Here are some of the ways we're doing that.
Network virtualization and using more energy-efficient hardware. Transitioning our vehicles to a low-emissions fleet. Expanding sustainability efforts for Warner Media films and television shows, and more. Unfortunately, going carbon neutral to reduce our footprint isn't going to be enough. Our business needs to adapt for the future. We're expanding our industry-leading climate change analysis tool nationwide. The tool can help us identify potential impacts climate change could have on our network and operations for up to 30 years from now. This will help us look at drought, wildfire, hurricane, and flooding projections across the U.S.
We know we can't change the effects of climate change overnight, but we are committed to using our technology to help solve these problems, because connecting our customers, our communities, and each other is the most important thing we do.
Well, I appreciate you playing that video, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Just give me a shout out if there's any issues. Couldn't say it better myself. That's our Chief Sustainability Officer, Charlene Lake, talking about our holistic programmatic view to climate change here at AT&T. And it really is an honor and privilege to kind of share our journey with you and kind of give you the ins and the outs of how we approach climate change. So if we can go ahead and load the slide, I'd appreciate it, please. And we can just go to the next slide. And in a nutshell, this really is our approach, right? Anytime you're talking about climate change, we understand there's two sides of that equation. There's, what are you doing on the mitigation side? What are you doing to reduce your emissions? And then what are you doing to prepare for the future impacts of climate change? So we address both of those. We believe it's our responsibility to do so, and we've done so. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going into detail on both of those issues. And I'm also going to talk about our outreach, because we believe it's our responsibility to not only be prepared for climate change ourselves, but make sure the communities in which we serve are prepared as well. So we'll have a little bit on that. But I did want to take a moment just to stay here and talk about reporting and governance. we're not going to go into much detail, but it would be a miss to not talk about that. And I know everybody is on their own journey in terms of building their climate change programs or portfolios, but reporting and governance, not just for general CSR purposes, but for climate change purposes, is really important as well. I know reporting fatigue is real and we all experience it, but I would suggest and advocate that reporting to the different frameworks are very, very important, because what it's going to do is pinpoint exactly where you're strong and where you're not. And that's okay, right? And the best thing you can do is know where your areas of opportunities are. So for those sometimes who aren't sure, where they should be reporting, what they should be reporting against, this is just a sample of how we report. But again, we encourage everybody to do that. Governance is also a really important part. What structure do you have, from leadership, from the ground up all the way to leadership? When you're doing these initiatives, we're very fortunate to have C-suite representation with all of our work, our Chief Sustainability Officer, Charlene Lake. And then, of course, she has access, as do others, to our board of directors. So all the work that we do, all the goals that we set, not only do we have C-suite level support and leadership, but we also have access to the board to get their feedback as well, just to make sure that we're going in the right direction as a company. And so, again, just didn't want to forget those two very important foundational pieces to an overall program. Let's go ahead and move forward and really focus first on our mitigation efforts. And we'll just one more slide. And as we load this, mitigation, again, everybody's journey is different. Just to make sure we're on the same page here, is really about how are you reducing your own emissions? What is your line in the sand? And for AT&T, our line in the sand is we're committed to being carbon neutral by 2035. We'll go into a little bit more detail as we go forward, but that was really important for us to do. We're very confident we can achieve that. And how you achieve that is obviously a big piece of the puzzle. And I'll go into a bit more detail, but on a high level, right, we're going to continue what we do around efficiency. The greenest kilowatt is the one you don't use, right? So continue to do the work that we've done there. Renewable energies, key component, especially when it comes to your purchase electricity. Transitioning to a low emissions fleet is going to be important for us because we have a sizable fleet. And then also Warner Media is now part of the AT&T family. So continuing their great work around TV and film production and the sustainability approach there is going to be important. And before we leave the slide, I want to kind of address a big issue, which is, what is the credibility of any goal? And for us, we point to the fact that we have a science-based target. That really underlines, the overall carbon neutral plan. And that's important just because, it's one thing for a company to say they're going to be carbon neutral. It's another thing to have a third party, look at your emission reduction goals, sign off on it, and show that they're in line with what the science says is necessary to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So I would highly encourage those who are setting emission reduction goals to look at setting a science-based target. I just think it's really good and it helps make the goal more credible overall. Next slide, please. And so just kind of going one level deeper on the actual goal itself, our carbon neutral goal does cover our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which is the largest part of our emissions at AT&T. Scope 1 is just the fuel that you burn. For us, a large part of that is our fleet, but we also have generators that we use, backup generators for disaster recovery and things of that nature. Scope 2 is simply your purchase electricity. And so that's really our main focus in our initial step into this area. And so just, again, going a bit deeper on the efficiency side, sometimes that gets ignored. Energy efficiency is just taken for granted, but we don't do that at AT&T. We focus on that. And I think it's really important not to be ashamed of the fact that driving energy efficiency is actually really good for the bottom line, right? So the less energy that you use, you drive down costs. And a byproduct of that is as you remove that energy, you reduce that consumption, you're also reducing your emissions. So it is that proverbial win-win. The largest part of our emissions are our purchase electricity or our Scope 2. So the energy that we do use, we started on a journey for renewable energy. A few years ago, we used very little, and I'm proud to say that as of today, we're one of the largest corporate purchasers of renewable energy in the United States. to bolster our portfolio and where it makes sense, continue to grow in that area. I mentioned our fleet. We do have a sizable fleet, lots of different types of vehicles as well. So we have a multi-year plan in place to look at optimizing our routes, reducing our fleet size, switching to hybrid and eventually electric vehicles. It's important to know that that's going to be a journey. Electric vehicles for passenger vehicles are probably going to happen before bucket trucks, and that's okay, as long as it's all part of your plan. And then again, finally, with Warner Media, already a long history and great track record of doing sustainable business practices, of reducing energy and resource consumption, on the film and television production sites, and they're going to continue that work in support of our carbon neutral goal. Next slide, please. And we can go one more, and now we're going to talk about resiliency. So the mitigation is important, reducing those emissions is important, but there are some built-in impacts to climate change that we do have to prepare for. And the question that we get asked a lot is, why focus on adaptation? Why focus on resiliency? For us, this journey goes back several years. And I was saying in the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a lot of changes. There's been an increase in research on climate impacts. What I mean by that is, going back a decade ago, you might see reporting on the impacts at a regional level. Well, now we have the ability to look at the impacts at a neighborhood level view and really quantify that. So that's been an important transition. International and domestic consensus on the science itself, is really, really important and allows businesses to truly kind of embrace this work and do this work. Transition and expectations is also a really big one. I would say 5 to 7 years ago, we got the occasional question around climate change, and today we probably get questions every single day from various external stakeholders about what we're doing around climate change. So there is an expectations that companies are doing their part. And then finally, there's an impact to our business. We have a world-class disaster recovery team that is prepared to respond to severe weather events and do a great job doing that. But there is a cost. Millions of dollars a year are spent recovering from severe weather events. So if we can get ahead of that and better prepare for that, we can not only drive down costs to our company, but we can better serve our customers by making sure we have the most reliable network possible. Next slide, please. And this is really the journey of how we got there. We didn't wake up one day and have a tool, obviously. Before we developed the tool, which we'll talk about in some detail, we performed a couple of different assessments, both an internal assessment and brought in a private third party to assess us as well. And we knew we needed to strengthen what we're doing around climate change. And the outcome of those assessments, there's some certain things rose to the top, right, in terms of key findings. The first is, have an area of focus, and that really was expanding your long-term planning. And we had a great history of short-term planning, again around weather, right, which is by definition short-term, but we needed to account for that long-term climate planning. We identified what were our strengths in order to do something like this. AT&T has a deep history in big data, analytics, lots of technological resources, so we wanted to make sure we leverage that. And ultimately, what we wanted to do is leverage all those capabilities to develop an actual climate risk tool that enabled that long-term climate resiliency. And so we'll talk about that in more detail as well. Next slide. As I mentioned, AT&T, we do have lots of resources at our disposal in terms of various technologies and expertise. But what we were not and are not are climate scientists ourselves, and we don't do climate modeling ourselves. So we knew we needed a credible independent third party that specialized in that work. I bring this up because there are a lot of questions about, where do you get your data from? And we get that from Argonne National Labs. They have one of the only North American climate models. They have lots of data sets available to them. They have supercomputing capabilities, which is really important when you're doing climate modeling. And they're already doing a lot of the climate modeling for the U.S. government. So it just made sense for us to work with Argonne National Lab. And since we made this announcement in 2019, we feel really strong in our position with using them and feel that we're getting the most credible data possible. Next slide. And once we established, right, we wanted to make a tool, some kind of tool. We weren't quite sure what it was going to look like at the end or in the beginning. And, we knew that we needed to go get the credible data. We did all that, but then we also need to think about how are you going to scope and scale this thing, right? And what is your starting point? So we very early on came to the conclusion that, you can't tackle everything, right? AT&T has a significant footprint just in terms of, where we serve, right? Internationally, we have business internationally. We serve, most, if not all of the U.S. So we had to fight the temptation to do everything at once. And so what we did is we chose a region that was, very susceptible, obviously, to climate change impacts. We also wanted to make sure that we were looking at the right climate change impacts. There's lots of them. So for us, we talked to our network folks, corporate real estate folks, and said, hey, what do we first need to worry about? And high intensity wind speed and flooding were the first two things. So technically, we look at 4 climate impact areas: inland flooding, coastal flooding, high intensity wind speed, hurricane related, and then high intensity wind speed non-hurricane related. And that was a really good starting point for us to begin the pilot, which we announced in 2019. Next slide, please. And coming out of that pilot, as with all ambitious projects, there are always lessons learned. And so we had several. I'm just going to highlight a few here. The first thing was that it was a smart idea, and still in hindsight, we should have started with 4 states, but 4 states is not enough. And that's really important just from an internal perspective as well, because if we're asking all of AT&T to embrace, a climate change analysis tool, you have to have it available in more than 4 states in order to have that mass adoption. So that became clear very early on. Understanding also that different business units are going to use the data in different ways, and that's okay. When we started out and we thought about, hey, we're definitely going to have our network planners use this and as a design and plan for the network of the future. But then as other folks figure out, that you're doing this, they say, hey, we can use it in this way, we can use it in that way. And that's actually a really good thing. And then we realized there's a need for regional specific data. And what I mean by that is, as much as, our community in Florida, we're happy that we had that information. It didn't help, our business units that are working every day in the Southeast and California as they fight against wildfires. So, I'm very happy that we already made this announcement, but very happy to share that we're expanding our pilot as we speak. I'm working on that project today. And we're going to go beyond the 4 states. And for flood and extreme wind, we're actually going to have a view for the entire contiguous 48 of the United States. And then for the 11 states where we have the largest risk for drought and wildfire, we're now going to have data points on that as well. So we're already making the kind of first of its kind tool even more comprehensive than it was for all the right reasons. Next slide, please. And we can go one more. So let's talk about the tool itself. We call it our CCAT, our climate change analysis tool. The heart of the tool really is getting that world-class climate data from our national lab and then overlaying that into a mapping tool, a GIS tool. And that was really important because as we did internal stakeholdering, we realized that just having access to the raw data wasn't enough. Just generating Excel reports or even risk reports that show hotspots wasn't enough. We needed to, have the ability to visualize the work that we were doing, and that's what we've been able to do. This is just a beta graphic that you see here when we were developing the tool. It has additional functionality today. But even here, hopefully, it gives you an impact of what we're trying to accomplish. So the black lines there is just an example of a fiber build out. The green dots an example of cell sites. So if you're a network planner, or if you're in corporate real estate and you have responsibility for this particular area, they can now sit at their desk, go into the software, and zoom in to exactly where they are going to build out, and they can click, literally just a mouse click away, and then boom, a box pops up and it shows them exactly what the projected maximum flooding is going to be, whether that's coastal or inland, and it's going to show them what the maximum projected wind speeds are going to be. And that's really important when you're building out a network as big as AT&T. So we're very, very glad that, that we've given our folks the ability to use this tool. It's a work in progress. As we figure out different ways to use the tool, different systems that we can put all the information into. But again, now having the ability to visually see your area of responsibility, click on that, and then have the projected climate change impacts is very, very powerful for us. Next slide, please. And folks always have questions, and we'll have some Q&A, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we do have a public white paper available. It's co-authored by AT&T and Argonne National Labs. So for those who are familiar with white papers, I promise you this is a little bit easier to read. We wanted to make sure that we were telling a story within this white paper, and I think we did accomplish that. But for those who delve deep into this area of expertise, you may wonder, what is your base data? What climate models were you using? That's all in there. So if you want to see a bit of how the sausage was made, I highly recommend the white paper that we co-authored along with Argonne National Labs. Next slide, please. So we're going to transition now, right? We painted the picture in terms of our holistic view, what we're doing around mitigation, carbon neutral, what we're doing in terms of our own resiliency, and that's the implementation of our CCAT tool. But then what else, right? And, our Chief Sustainability Officer, Charlene Lake, says this is an area of climate change where you don't compete, right? You collaborate. And it doesn't make any sense for us to, in a vacuum, be climate resilient. We need everybody to be climate resilient. So what we've actually done is made all of the data sets provided by Argonne National Labs publicly available. We can't obviously make the tool available for proprietary and licensing reasons. However, the data itself is available today. So anybody can go to our website, download that data. So if you're in those 4 states, doesn't matter if you're an NGO, a business, a utility, a local municipality, you can download that data and get those projections for those 4 data sets. Again, and we've committed to doing that for the new data sets that we're getting as part of the expansion of the tool as well. So we'll be providing those in the future. We just kind of feel that's our responsibility to do that. And again, just wanted to point out that it's available for everybody. Next slide. The other thing we wanted to do is beyond just making the data available, we wanted to encourage people to use the data and more specifically encourage them to use it maybe in a different way than we were, right? So what we did is we issued a climate change community challenge. We put an open call out to all universities in the Southeast within those 4 states to apply. We chose 5 universities to work with their local governments. We funded $250,000 in total for these projects, and we've actually made all of these reports publicly available as well. But as we go to the next slide, it was just really important, again, to go beyond just making the data available and encouraging others to use it. And for the most part, academic settings are a great way to do that. And I won't go through all these in detail. And again, there are actually detailed reports on each of these. But I found it very interesting. So when you look at Appalachian State, they use their project to assess how socioeconomic disparities affect communities that contribute and how it contributes to climate change within those communities, right? Their climate vulnerability. So that's not a way that we initially looked at it. When you look at University of South Florida or University of Miami, they actually use the data to build their own systems, right? Chris, in the case of University of Florida, and the ICRA model for the University of Miami. So, having that base data, allowed them to do that or help them at least to do that. And, we're very proud of that. So, again, outreach, making it publicly available, issuing a community challenge, and then we'll go to the next example, which is the work that we're doing with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And so this is just a different way to think about using the data as well. So the National Fish and Wildlife, they have the capability, and they have for a long time, of identifying projects to restore, increase, and strengthen natural infrastructures in communities, right? Communities at risk. So they had that ability before we ever got our data. But now we can take their ability, overlap that with our ability through our CCAT tool to identify areas where our network is at risk for climate change impact. And then we add the additional focus of really going in and looking at underserved and minority communities. So then what you have is not only the environmental aspect coming into play, but the social aspect as well, because we know underserved communities are particularly vulnerable, and in most cases has contributed very little, right, to the actual emission. So we want to make sure that we're doing our part to address that issue. And so our work with National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is a way that we're doing that, and we're helping to fund some of those projects. Next slide. And then just because there's a lot of information that we covered here, and I'm sure folks want to know about maybe not all of it, but bits and pieces of it. So we actually have not only our own CSR webpage that goes deep into all the environmental stuff that we talked about today, but we have our climate resiliency page that covers in much more detail, again, that holistic programmatic view of climate change. So I'm proud I kept myself very, very close to time. So I will pause there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Shannon. Great information, very interesting. Katie, are there any questions for Shannon?
Yes, and there are a couple of questions about shorter term goals before 2035. Questions about emissions. What are the intermediate emissions and carbon emissions intensity reduction goals? I think these are asking more about shorter term goals before 2035.
So now I won't pretend to memorize them all, and I'll refer folks to our website, but we have short-term and interim goals as well, KPIs, as well. We just retired, very proud that we just retired a set of goals that were 2020 goals. We accomplished them all. We had both absolute reduction goals for emissions as well as energy intensity reductions. That's really important. At the heart of what we do is connecting people, so our network is a big part of this equation for us. So the ability to push through more data using less energy, and that's an energy intensity metric, has always been something we focused on, and we will continue to do that. I think for us, having that longer term 2035 goal is really important. And then on top of that, reporting out on it every single year for transparency is going to be key. Within our science-based targets, those goals actually, our reduction goals specific to our science-based targets come before 2035, I believe, specific to our scope 1 and scope 2, that's 2030. And then we actually have a science-based target that impacts our scope 3 as well, and our supply chain, and I believe that's 2024. So we do have lots of individual KPIs and goals that we have, because obviously you want to have both approaches. You don't want to focus on just one. But I think most importantly is we report out on these every single year through our CSR, annual CSR report.
Anything else, Katie, at all?
Yes, we have a few more.
Okay.
Yes, we have a few more. So our next question is about the Dallas 2030 district. If you're not familiar, it's a collective near downtown Dallas, and the goal of the Dallas 2030 district is to cost effectively and collaboratively reduce the environmental impact of building construction and operation. The question is AT&T a member of the Dallas 2030 district? And if not, does it have any plans to become a member?
So I don't know off the top of my head, I apologize, but I will follow up and get that information. I can tell you, that we're always trying to be involved in every community in which we work. Dallas is near and dear to our heart. It is global headquarters for us. So, and we work with the city on a regular basis on lots of different issues. I just don't want to misspeak to that specific initiative.
Okay, thank you for that. We have another question about land ownership and management. How much land does AT&T own, and is there a plan to save money, reduce erosion, mitigate flooding, and restore native wildlife habitat on AT&T land?
So there's a lot in that question, and I know what my expertise is, and that is environmental sustainability. I'm not a corporate real estate professional, so again, I do apologize. I can absolutely follow up and get some information that we make publicly available in terms of how much land that we use. I can tell you, when you look at our actual climate change analysis tool, it does attempt to do just what the question is asking, which is, making sure that, we're prepared for the future impacts of climate change. And there's lots of ways to do that when you look at different adaptation strategies. And then I'd point to the work that we're doing with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. There's the benefit to the community itself. There's also the benefit to the network that is built within that community. And the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation does a great job, right? Again, trying to restore eco-services to better prepare those communities to be flood resistant and things of that nature. So those are two examples I'd give of how we're trying to adjust that.
I think Mr. Gagne, we have time for a couple more questions. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay, great, because we have one about methane for your fleet here in DFW. Does AT&T have any plans to use methane or derivative of it for its fleet here in the DFW Metroplex?
So on that question, the best I can answer that is, so we're looking at all available options, right, to transition our fleet to a low and zero emission fleet. Again, not being within our global fleet operation, I would say that traditionally what we do is we look at all available options. We want to make sure that it's right for the business as well, right? Because you have to keep that in mind. But we're also always trying to do right by the environment. So we do have a commitment. We're actually part of a couple of different industry groups, to have a transition to, a low and zero emission fleet. So although I don't know what our specific plans are for that perspective, but in general, we like to look at all of our options, see what works best for the business, always trying to keep the environment in mind.
Yeah, one more
question.
If I get one more.
Yes. And pertinent to us at the City of Dallas, what can local governments do to help you get to your goals?
So I think, the most important thing is that we're all climate resilient, right? And so I think we're always ready and willing to work with anybody who wants to talk about this. I did mention that, as we expand, that'll include Texas and Dallas and the contiguous 48 for flooding and high intensity wind speed. But Texas is also one of the 11 states that we're going to have drought and wildfire information as well. So we will make that publicly available. We will make ourselves available for anybody in the city who wants to talk about how to use that data, how we're using that data. I personally participate in those type of calls on a pretty regular basis. There's lots of different cities and municipalities that reach out and say, hey, how are you using this? How can we use it? So yeah, I think the most important thing is that we're all climate resilient, because it's no good if only some of us are or only one of us is climate resilient.
We actually could do one more if there's anything out there. If not, we can move on to the next segment.
I think we've covered all of the questions, so thank you so much.
That concludes this segment, and Shannon will be with us for the duration of the symposium. So I appreciate that, Shannon. Great information. Now, if you have any other questions, feel free to post them in the queue. We'll keep track of those throughout the symposium as well. Now I'm going to shift over to the next segment of our presentation. It's my distinct pleasure to tell you about the third segment, which is a moderated conversation between Council Member Omar Narvaez and Robert S. Kaplan, President and CEO of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank. We are honored and excited to have Rob with us today. And about 45 minutes into the segment, we'll begin taking audience questions. Our goal is to take as many questions that we can in the order they are received. Let me take a moment to tell you about Rob, and then I'll give the segment over to Councilmember Narvaez. Rob has served as the 13th President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas since September 2015. He represents the 11th Federal Reserve District on the Federal Open Market Committee and the formulation of U.S. monetary policy, and oversees the 1,200 employees of the Dallas Fed. He was previously the Martin Marshall Professor of Management Practice and a Senior Associate Dean at Harvard Business School. He's the author of several books, including What You Really Need to Lead, The Power of Thinking and Acting Like an Owner. Prior to joining Harvard in 2006, he was Vice Chairman of the Goldman Sachs Group, Incorporated, with global responsibility for the firm's investment banking and investment management divisions. In 1990, he became a partner for them and served as co-chairman of the firm's partnership committee. He was also a member of the management committee. Following his 23-year career at Goldman Sachs, he became senior director of the firm. He was born and raised in Prairie Village, Kansas. Rob received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from the University of Kansas and a master's degree in Business Administration at Harvard Business School. Rob is with us today because he finds himself increasingly discussing the impact of climate change on the 11th District. In particular, severe weather events can have a substantial human and economic cost to all of us. I think most of us attending just faced such an event not 60 days ago, with temperatures dropping below zero for days here in North Texas. Now I welcome back Councilmember Narvaez as he will moderate this segment. Mr. Narvaez believes in building stronger neighborhoods and community relationships, and this has been a focus for him during his term of office. His positive outlook and support have been vital as the City Council approved the first comprehensive environmental and climate action plan last year, and as we work to implement the 8 major goals of the plan and the 97 action items. Councilmember Narvaez, please join us again.
So much, Director Gagne, and I'm really excited about this segment and getting to have a conversation with Mr. Kaplan, the President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank here in Dallas. This is really exciting for us to get to hear from such an esteemed colleague of ours and partner here in the city of Dallas. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kaplan so that he can give his welcoming remarks, and we can jump into it. We might pick up a couple extra minutes to answer a few extra questions out there. So Mr. Kaplan, I turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. Great to be with you. Great to be with you, Council Member. So let me make a few comments about the economy, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about climate change at the Dallas Fed. So let me just start 100,000 feet. It's our judgment at the Dallas Fed that the U.S. economy is going to grow in the range of 6.5% in 2021. So we're going to have a sizable rebound. Some private forecasters think the growth rate's going to be higher than that. But the point of all of these forecasts is we think the vaccines and the pace of vaccines will outpace growth of the variants. People in the next few months will get increasingly more comfortable in greater mobility and engagement, and going to restaurants and doing a number of things in person-to-person contact businesses that they haven't been comfortable with. There's been substantial amount of fiscal support, and with all that, we're going to have a high level of growth. Now, and I would say the Texas economy pretty much mirrors the United States. Severe downturn last year, recovery after started in the spring through the rest of the year with fits and starts because of the virus. And we expect continued strong growth, and we're seeing strong growth this year. So what are 2 or 3 things that are unusual about what we've been through the last year or so? Number one, this pandemic has affected different industries in different ways and members of the workforce very differently. If you're in the person-to-person contact service business, you had a rough 2020, very likely, and you might be having a rough time still because of people are just not quite yet comfortable enough to return to active engagement. But many industries and businesses had record years last year and are doing well right now. What's more pronounced for us is the way it's affected the workforce. If you've got a college education, you may well have done fine through this pandemic. You're probably in a job where you can work remotely. You're much less likely to have lost your job or lost hours. If, on the other hand, you're one of the 46 million workers in this country that have a high school education or less, it is more likely that you can't work remotely. You're more likely to have lost your job, lost income. And so we're seeing a lot of the repair work to do in our economy is getting those with a high school education or less, particularly those without a skill, getting them back into the workforce. The other group that's been disproportionately negative affected is working women with children. We have seen a historic drop in the participation rate of women with children in the workforce, understandably because kids aren't able to be in school, lack of access to childcare, and so on. And so those are things we're watching very carefully, and I just want to call them out. Now, let me talk a little bit about climate change and how we think about this. As was said in the introduction, and I'll just reiterate, the Fed has dual mandate goals: full employment and price stability. We don't have an independent role related to issues of climate change and other issues, but my job and our job is to understand economic conditions and reflect those in policy. And I can tell you, and I'll go through some examples right now, climate change and the effect of climate change and the way businesses are dealing with climate change is having a significant effect on economic conditions. So my job is to understand it. Our team's job is to understand it and to factor that in to our policy views. So let me give you some examples. We've already said, you know, we're at the receiving end in Texas on, I don't need to tell you, hurricanes, droughts, floods, and most recently, many scientists we talk to believe the extreme weather event we just faced, the cold weather, is a product of climate change. So let me take that most recent event as an example of the ripple effects. So it obviously affected the state. I don't need to tell you that. But let me tell you what the ripple effects were. We house in Texas some of the nation's most important petrochemical and refinery infrastructure. That petrochemical infrastructure had to shut down for a certain number of days. It's created ripple effects, certainly in the United States and globally, in disrupting logistics and supply chain arrangements. If you order a couch, if you order anything with plastic, which are a lot of goods, you're gonna have to wait longer for those goods and services. It's disrupted that. So that's not just a Texas effect, that's a nationwide effect. And we're seeing those shortages lead to higher prices and other impediments to other industries that rely on that industry. Hurricane Harvey had a substantial effect on refinery and petrochemical infrastructure, and also had a big effect on impacting the shipping lanes along the coast. We are responsible in this district for shipping lanes, and the folks that run the ports tell us, you know, we're one or two extreme weather events away from really jeopardizing the transit of goods and services, which will affect the entire nation. So those are some examples of the ripple effects we may not always think about. The other thing we're very sensitive to, we've got the greatest concentration of fossil fuel producing industries in the country. And we're among the leaders in wind and solar and research on battery storage in this state. So you'd say, well, how does this affect the fossil fuel industry? I can tell you, if you talk to any CEO in this industry, they are spending, many of them, billions of dollars on sequestration, carbon capture, and other techniques that would limit greenhouse gas emissions. And even as the country dramatically increases our use of renewables, we're going to go through a transition that's likely going to take not years but decades, in that even as fossil fuels are a smaller and smaller percentage of global energy consumption, there's still going to be substantial demand. And so one of our challenges in the 11th district, and one of my jobs, is to understand that energy transition, because while you want to aggressively move to renewables, if you impact the ability of the healthy fossil fuel industry to provide its product, you're going to create price spikes for millions of consumers in the United States. So one of our jobs is also to understand that transition. And then the last comment I'll make is all this subject of climate change has big financial stability considerations. So what do I mean by that? Again, I'll take the recent cold event that just happened. I don't need to tell you, and there was an event actually a few days ago that caused a short-term spike in heating prices. You might not think it, but there were billions and billions of dollars of counterparty losses because of hedging transactions by companies and the industry which were impacted by that spike. And it just reminded us here at the Dallas Fed, and reminded me, if you had a severe climate event that went on for not for a few days, but for a more extended period, you could have real financial stability impacts of that. So part of our job is to understand that. So probably let me stop there. I just want to set the table as we go back to the councilman to ask questions. But this is a little bit of the context on why this is such an important topic for us at the Dallas Fed.
Thank you so much, Rob. There's some really good information that you gave us. And now I know why my sofa has been delayed for 6 extra weeks. So thank you for that. It gives me a little extra, not being so upset and impatient. You know what I mean? So thank you.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you some questions. And the first one is, in your seat, you often look at the risks to the economic outlook. How do environmental concerns and climate change factor into your outlook for the nation and Texas?
So we've just spent the last 14 months in this country experiencing a tail risk. It's a tail risk that turned it out to manifest itself. And it's a great example of how a low probability event, if you don't insure against it and manage against it, can be devastating. I'd say climate change is an example of a tail risk. It has current effects, which we have to deal with, and I just went through those. But what you also have to worry about over the years, will there be more extreme effects that have more significant tail effects? And so normally in life and in business, as a country and as a world, when you have a tail event, you try to do some things to insure against it. And sometimes that's often a sensible thing to do. In this case, the actions we can take to quote unquote insure against some of these climate risks actually will create jobs, fuel growth in a number of different industries in this state. It will create real opportunity. No question it'll create some transition, but investing in tail insurance actually is commercially attractive. But I think about this as an extreme tail event that you'll want to take some actions to mitigate.
Wonderful, and thank you for that. I serve on the economic committee for the city of Dallas, so hearing some of these things is really important as we move forward as well as a city. And then also being chairman of the environmental committee, it's like people don't realize that there's a synergy between the two and how they overlap. So thank you for giving us that.
And can I say one thing about that?
Please.
Around the country, many people think, oh, in Texas, you're heavily related to fossil fuels. This is not an active consideration. You can't talk today to a energy producer or someone in the energy industry who is not actively not only thinking about how to limit their greenhouse gas emissions, but might also be investing aggressively in wind, solar, renewables, battery storage, and all these new techniques. The corporate world is far down the road on these topics. So you can't talk to a company that isn't taking actions, LEED certified buildings, and a number of things they're doing to limit their footprint. This is an active topic when you're talking to CEOs.
Wonderful, and that's good information as well. So thank you for giving us a follow-up there. The next question is, when people think of Texas, they often think of energy. How are environmental concerns impacting the business models of the energy executives that you're talking to?
So, for starters, if you're in the fossil fuel business, you're having a hard time attracting capital. A lot of the historic sources of capital, pension funds, endowments, other institutional investors are saying, we're going to limit our capital that we let go into fossil fuels. Okay, so that's number one. So this whole industry, the Permian, has had to adjust from the fact they don't have access to capital, yet the world and the country expects them to keep producing their product. And so what they're learning is they have to produce their product out of cash flow. They can't raise capital like they did in the past. And so that's number one. So that's changed the model. It's causing a number of failures, bankruptcies, restructurings, and mergers. You know, it's having restructure. You'll see this industry continue to get more consolidated, less leverage, and needing to make do and drill based on cash flow. The other thing is they're drilling less. So even with higher prices of oil this year, drilling is not going to, net production not going to be up in the United States that much, maybe from 11 million barrels a day to 11 and a quarter, 11 and a half. That would surprise people. They're being pressured to return more of their capital to shareholders. The shareholders want their capital back, and they don't want as much of it cash flow put in drilling. The other thing is we're hearing from the industry, again, they're starting to think in the future, we want to make the shift with the world. So if you're a refiner, you want to start think about down the road, you're going to be changing over your products, more clean energy, airline fuel that maybe is a different composition, and they're starting to work on all those things. Then I mentioned also money, lots of money being spent by the industry is while they are producing, they want to limit their greenhouse gas emissions. And so they are actively investing substantial money in sequestration, which is very expensive, carbon capture, and a whole range of other alternatives, and doing research on wind, solar, battery storage, et cetera.
Thank you. And we already have a question, so I'm going to ask it now from the audience, since it has to do with what we were just talking about. So good. That way we don't ask other questions and come back and everybody's forgotten already.
I think
So it says, this question is from Michael Martin. It says, Rob, you referenced the sensitivity of the fossil fuel markets and how the ripple through the economy and financial markets because of the commodity impact. Academically speaking, would it be a better, more stable, more equitable future if we do not have such sensitivity to a single global commodity like crude by broadly diversifying our energy mix and its geographic availability?
Well, that trend is in fact happening. We're living through that trend right now. So then the question is, how fast can you make the transition? And while you're making the transition, it's not going to be binary. It's going to be a process. So I think what your question just asked is happening, but while it's happening, here's a risk. If let's say the fossil fuel industry, the United States is producing of crude and crude-related petroleum products 11 million barrels a day and a little bit more. We're reopening. Demand is going up in the United States. We haven't yet made the transition away from fossil fuel-related cars and other power sources. If that industry starts producing less or doesn't keep up, the price at the pump is going to be higher. So this sensitivity that you refer to is everybody recognizes it, but you got to realize it's a process. And I mean, it's not a multi-year process, it's probably a multi-decade process to transition out. And that's the part I try to emphasize, because sometimes when I turn on the television, you talk about we're going to go from this to this. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with exactly what you said. As how many years ago, 10, 12 years ago, we heard of the first hybrid car, maybe the thought of an electric vehicle, and they weren't very popular, and they didn't I won't say they didn't run well, but they just weren't popular because it was inefficient for regular everyday people like myself and like you, right? That it's like, I just want to get to the grocery store. I don't have a place to charge this car up. But now you're seeing much more infrastructure being built, and and I'm starting to see many of my friends and family members starting to think about hybrids and electric vehicles. And so like I happen to live in a building, and one of the reasons that I wanted to move into the building that I moved into was that, one, it had recycling available for multifamily, but number two, it actually has hookups for electric vehicles. I don't even drive an electric vehicle, but I thought that was important for me to live in a building that offered it. So we're starting to see that transition happening. little at a time. So it makes sense what you said, that it's a slow shift, but we're starting to see it as these electric vehicles become more popular. These hybrids are becoming much more popular. I mean, there's even SUVs that are hybrid, and then we're starting to look at public transportation, big giant buses, and we're even looking at sanitation trucks that possibly can be a change for us here at the City of Dallas. So exactly what you're saying is we're starting to see it happening. It's just a matter of how quick and fast, I guess, the rest of us can build that infrastructure.
Yeah, and even when I look at the most aggressive, and we do scenarios here, the most aggressive assumptions about how fast we can do it, what's inescapable and what's kind of struck me from studying is how long that, even going very fast, it's going to take a number of years.
Absolutely. Well, and it's just the technology is improving and it's changing quickly. I mean, look how fast we were forced with this pandemic to figure out how to do virtual everything, and we were able to do it very quickly and fast. And for some organizations like the City of Dallas, we stumbled at the beginning, but then we were able to catch up really fast because it was something we've never done. Having 800 people call in through phone and or virtual, it's never been done in the City of Dallas before, much less any other governmental entity. So it wasn't like we had a best practice for someone else, and once we got towards it, we got out of the, we started running with it, and now we have other governmental agencies asking us how to do it.
So a good example, I can't resist on that transition, is so great. Most of us have made the transition. If you've got a high school education or less, it's more likely you don't have access to Wi-Fi. And worse, your kids are more likely to have dropped out of high school during this because your income challenges, and maybe they weren't able to successfully participate in this transition with Wi-Fi. So this is an example of how long we've got to invest more in Wi-Fi. And that's a critical imperative throughout this state and the country so that everybody can make this transition.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up Wi-Fi, because something we're trying to work on here at the City of Dallas, as well as our partners like AT&T and Dallas Independent School District. So thank you for bringing that up. So we have one last question that I'm going to do for a follow-up on the original question we started. And it said, you say that the CEOs of the fossil fuel industry are very aware of the changes, and we're planning on being a part of the transition. Will natural gas capture and it says elimination of flaring happen without regulation? And this question was from Brad Smith.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And my guess is you're going to see all the above, meaning I'm hearing when I talk to CEOs, they're aggressively acting on this, either because there is regulation or because they anticipate it. And also they understand, and they're hearing from their shareholders and their boards of directors that they need to, again, be more environmentally constructive in what they're doing. And so there are a whole range of reasons. And yeah, some regulatory aspect, I'm sure, will be part of it.
Okay, very good. And then we have another question from the audience. And you know me, I like questions from the audience. It makes it more exciting of a conversation. So this one has to do with one of the kind of questions I kind of brought up and then you answered. So it says, Rob, do you have concerns regarding the ability of our generating infrastructure to meet the demand of increasing reliability on electricity, especially as we transition to more electric cars? And this question was from Michael Carlton.
Yeah, so this is all part of this has to be planned. So there's the basics where every part of the grid has to be weatherized. That goes without saying. And we learned some lessons from what just happened, that we had a lack of weatherization across the board. Okay, then yes, to your point, as you're transitioning more and more to electric vehicles, we need to build a whole range of infrastructure to accommodate that, including what you're talking about, not only the charging stations, but also the mix in what we're happening. So can we do planned and strategically invested in, years in advance, yes, also that needs to be done.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're going to move on to another question, which is recently the Fed joined the network of central banks and supervisors for greening the financial system. What is the end goal of this group, and what is the Fed doing to properly evaluate the impact of environmental risks on the financial stability?
So, I mean, one of the primary things globally that's going on relates to financial stability, and I mentioned that. That for me, that's just one aspect of why we look at this. But there are financial exposures around the world, and then there's tail risk exposures in addition to extreme weather events. And I think we're trying to work in an integrated way globally to make sure that our financial system is resilient. And for us, we have jurisdiction over banking. There's also non-bank financials that we don't have jurisdiction over. We want to make sure that the financial system that we oversee, the banks and banking system and globally, is resilient to these risks. I think you just went, you may be on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wasn't on mute, and then I pushed myself on mute to talk. So it's the new world, right, that we're in, as we keep muting our own selves or forgetting to get off mute. So is there another question about this one? All right, we have a question from the audience. Danielle McClellan has asked, what's your prognosis for this region's capacity to develop infrastructure and new markets for sustainable businesses, and how can the Dallas Fed impact that? For example, Georgia has a large number of carpet manufacturers and has invested in businesses that are able to recycle old carpets. Where are the opportunities in North Texas to help divert waste from one of the largest landfills in the state?
Yeah, so here's what I'm finding. And again, my background, I'm not a PhD economist, I'm a business person. And you may know, I worked on this subject for 10 years when I was at Harvard. I was co-head of the greenhouse gas emissions task force for the university. So in that, I talked to lots and lots of businesses around the country and globally. And so here's what I've learned, and here's what I'm seeing here. There are enormous new business opportunities from this transition. Your questioner asked about a couple of examples. And I think as long as, and they don't rely on the government, by the way, although some of them do. But what I'm seeing is the business community is doing what it often does. Once they realize there's a trend and an opportunity, they're adapting. There's also, I'm finding, lots of capital. I mentioned how hard it is to get capital to fossil fuels. Anything that improves sustainability, limits greenhouse gas emissions, improves the environment, there is good access to capital for that right now. Lots of private sector folks want to invest in this or lend to it. And so I'm seeing great potential on it. What's the role of the Fed? I think basically, again, our mandate is full employment and price stability. So my job is to understand these trends. And I have the opportunity also in my community role to be a convener in the same way we're a convener for how to help at-risk groups, Wi-Fi, other things. I think we can play a constructive convening role on opportunities to improve our ability to capitalize on a lot of these trends. But I'm seeing it, and it's pretty widespread. As I've said before, and I think Omar has heard me say this, the business community, the private sector, I'm finding is well ahead of the government in terms of being aggressive and moving ahead. And there's capital flows have already shifted. Boards of directors, shareholder pressure has shifted. Companies and company CEOs, if you're a company CEO and you're not on top of these developments, particularly if you're a public company CEO, you're going to have a problem. In the same way diversity and inclusion is on the minds of every CEO you talk to, this is on the minds and part of the report card for almost every CEO I speak with.
Absolutely, and I'm seeing, this. I don't want to call it a trend, but I'm seeing this, the public really getting much more engaged when it comes to climate action and the environment and all the different issues with sustainability and reducing our carbon footprint. It seems like, I'm not going to even just say locally, but it seems like at the national and the global level, we're seeing this come across, and we're going to need the business community to help us. Because without the business community, we're not going to get there, and we can't expect the government to do it all by ourselves. But at the same time, it used to be that the government was ahead of the business industry in certain issues, and now it's the business communities are kind of leading and the government's following, and that's something that we've got to catch up on, even here at a local level.
And I would actually say the business community's leap to get ahead of this started 10, 15 years ago,
Sure.
in my experience.
Yeah.
And universities got on top of it. So this is, and capital flows started to change. And that's been going on now for a number of years. It's accelerating, though, now.
Sure, absolutely. So we have another question from the audience, and it's from Brianna Cook. Thank you, Rob, for reiterating how any climate action and policy needs to protect lower income earners. As we transition our energy sources, we need to be mindful that not everyone has the financial capacity to handle that transition. Economists agree that a price on carbon with a carbon cashback would be an effective way to use to reduce emissions quickly, while also helping the bottom percent of income earners with a cashback. What are your thoughts on a price on carbon at the national level?
So I'll be careful on this because the Fed is our mandate is to stay out of fiscal decisions and these type of decisions, like putting a price on carbon. Having said that, you may know from following us, we've had a number of economists. I'll give you an example. Greg Mankiw, public session with. We've had a number of other public sessions, and I'll just tell you what I've observed. On a bipartisan basis, and what I mean by that, Republicans, Democrats, both sides of the aisle, economists, leaders have pretty much bipartisan consensus. They've told us they pretty much agree that some type of system that puts a tax on carbon, they have said that they would advocate for it. You said the key thing though, cashback. If there isn't some adjustments, it could have a negative effect on lower income people because it would be regressive. They would pay that cost, and so as long as you have credits that allow lower income people to weather that and afford it. But I'll just observe, we've noticed there's not a lot of bipartisan agreement on taxes and a whole range of issues, but that's one where I've observed there's been pretty much bipartisan advocacy. Now, that doesn't mean it will happen, and it doesn't mean it's not politically sensitive, so I'll stay out of it. But I can speak for what I'm hearing from economists on both sides of the aisle.
Excellent. And then we have one more question for the audience. As due to our energy heritage and massive resources, and ideal location, do you see North Texas as a potential national global hub for clean energy tech, including manufacturing and distribution?
Well,
and that was from Michael Martin.
The answer is yes. So the answer is yes, definitive yes. And here's what we're seeing are the trends in Texas generally. We are outgrowing the nation. One of the reasons we're outgrowing the nation is a constant, and this is true of Dallas and North Texas, a consistent and accelerating migration of people and firms from around the country to come here. And it's kind of a virtuous cycle. Burlington Northern, Santa Fe years ago, their headquarters are here. Amazon decides to create a logistics center. Toyota sees that they come, and the more people that come here, the more people want to come here. And so I don't see any reason why, and it would be logical that we would be the leader in the clean energy industry. We already are in certain aspects of it. And so I think that would make enormous sense, and it's consistent with. You listen, Elon Musk is locating a substantial facility in Austin, and so there's no reason why we're about as well positioned as anybody in the country to be a leader in these sectors.
And I would completely agree with you as well on that one. And we're welcoming all the clean energy folks to come on to Dallas, and I will welcome you here in the city of Dallas especially.
By the way, can I just say, so what would stop that from happening? And I'll just say it because it has to be said. We don't do a good job improving early childhood literacy. We don't do a good job beefing up skills training. We don't build enough infrastructure. I know we're working on all these things, by the way. We don't do a better job improving access to health care for at-risk populations. We have the highest number of uninsured in the country in this. I'm confident we are making these choices, but this is what companies who are thinking of coming here, and I talk to them just about every week. This is what they wanted. What's the workforce? What's the healthcare system? What's the access, education system? And that's why these investments we're making are among the highest return investments we could make. And it will have the ripple effect of making it far more likely that we'll be the leader in clean energy and a whole range of other industries. So I'll just say that.
No, absolutely. And I'll give an example. It's been about 3 years ago, I think, I got to work with Amazon to bring a distribution center here to District 6 in far west Dallas. And one of the big things was they wanted the vast majority of the positions to be part-time. And I knew that if those positions are part-time, they don't come with healthcare, they don't come with pensions, they don't come with, right? And so we really advocated for and made sure and ended up with the negotiation that if we were going to be good partners, that any company coming to Dallas has to also be a good neighbor and be a good partner with the city. And Amazon ended up making all the positions full-time, offering healthcare and their retirements and everything that comes with a full-time position, and a living wage, which is beneficial to everyone here in the city of Dallas. And then making sure that also we did local hiring so that Dallasites that are paying these taxes that are being invested into the company to come would also be able to get those same jobs. So and now we're seeing that with all of our economic development deals, just by making sure that we tell what our values are and our priorities. So like you said, we're not the best at it, but we're working on it. And we're going to get there because I think we all see that, in order to attract, we're hearing from the companies as well. This is what you're missing. You're missing A, B, C, D, E, F. Right. Well, we've got to fix A, B, C, D, E, F. And that's what I think is fantastic, is that Dallas is committed to getting there.
And by the way, here's the difference between us and most cities and states in the United States. We have the money to do it. So a lot of states in this country are struggling with how to improve these same priorities, but because their population and workforce growth is stagnant, they're struggling to find ways to pay for it. Texas and Dallas, but Texas generally, we've got the money, not perfect, but because we have workforce growth, we have enough money. Then for us, it's a matter not how do we get the money, it's do we make the right choices. And in the past, a lot of these choices were talked about as a nice thing to do. And what you're hearing from us at the Dallas Fed is that may be true, but it's a high return, smart business thing to do.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So we have one more question from the audience. It says, is Rob able to comment on proposals to change the renewable energy federal tax credit to a direct payment to get around the limitation of the current program, which requires a tax appetite? Apologies if I have not stated this correctly, but I hope this idea comes across. And this is from James, and I hope I say the last name right, Orenstein.
Okay, so James, it's a good question. I'm familiar with it, but given my job in monetary policy, we try to adhere very carefully. I don't comment. That's that's under the congressional mandates, and I'm very sensitive, and they are too, that I don't tread in that area. So I'll stay in my lane. But I think it's good you're raising that question.
Excellent, Rob. And I kind of felt you were going to have that kind of an answer because you probably had to, and I appreciate you following your ethics and making sure that you stand strong to those. So I appreciate that. The next question I have is, we understand that the Reserve Bank itself was sustainably designed. Are there some features of your own facility that you wish other entities would adopt? And they give examples of a green roof, energy efficiency, water conservation, etc.
So let me tell you interesting. So this building was built in 1992. So I don't have any, I can't take credit for what was done, but yes, you're right, with sustainability. And we have a new headquarters we built in Houston, same thing. And very much, you wouldn't surprise you, taking into account, LEED certified criteria and things like that. We've done one more thing though, and in the last 5 years at the Dallas Fed, and a little bit I brought from Harvard because I learned about this. We also have a number of other initiatives we now instituted beyond the building, beyond what existed, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions footprint, okay? And that includes every aspect of what we do, our energy sources, our activities in the building, behavior of our people, the car vehicle, and so on and so forth. And so we did the sort of the normal drill you would do. You measure your baseline. You then say we want to make these kind of goals to improve that baseline, and then we had an action plan against the baseline to limit our greenhouse gas emissions. What I learned in my prior life, if you don't run laboratories, and if you do a research lab, that creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions issues. So set that aside. If you run just a basic building like we do, or a business, a plan like that with some very straightforward steps, you can meaningfully reduce your greenhouse gas emissions footprint. And that's what we've worked on doing here. And we have somebody in charge of it, longtime Fed person. We work on it. It's a key initiative of the Dallas Fed. Wonderful.
That's great news. And it's also something that I believe that the vast majority of us can look to as an example of how to do things and have a blueprint of how to do things and do them correctly as we move forward. Here in the city of Dallas, we're pushing more and more to have LEED certified buildings. We just opened a brand new library in the Vickery Meadows neighborhood in North Dallas, almost Northeast Dallas. And what's really exciting is it's a LEED certified. And at the last minute, we were able to add solar panels to it to give it an even extra level. And there would just happen to be a little extra money, and we were able to do that. And so it's an almost completely sustainable building now at this point. And we just can't wait till the pandemic ends so we can actually let the people inside of it so that they can actually utilize the building. So, but that's a whole nother conversation. So the next question I have is, what role does the Federal Reserve play in combating climate change?
So I'll be careful on this. We don't have an independent role in quote unquote combating climate change. Our congressionally given mandates, which I'm very sensitive, and I think elected representatives both sides all are sensitive that we stay in our lanes, full employment and price stability. So my job and our job here, our 1,300 people, our job is to understand economic conditions, make sure we have financial stability, and the way I've incorporated and we've incorporated climate change in that is I'm basically said it is central to understanding economic conditions and to reaching our full employment and price stability objectives in incorporating environmental analysis and sustainability analysis in the work we do, and also in thinking about financial stability. Outside that dual mandate role, we have a role here to be a leader in our community. On that, I have a little more latitude to convene groups and give my views and share thoughts on it. But in terms of monetary policy, it's in the context of our dual mandate.
Excellent. And the next question is, is there anything else the Fed can be doing to help address climate change issues?
I guess my own view is the most important thing. I think we can always do a better job being close to industry and community leaders, understanding better how climate change and climate risk is affecting this district and our country, and trying to raise those issues, flag those issues, and incorporating them into our economic analysis. I still think that's the main vehicle for what we're doing, and also making sure we incorporate it into making sure we have financial stability. That's our congressionally mandated role, and we do a lot of work in the community, as I said, away from the dual mandate, and I think that we've been very forthcoming and open and aggressive, I guess, for lack of a better term, and just playing a role as a leader and leading citizen in the community. But that extends the whole range of issues. I mentioned Wi-Fi, early childhood literacy, the digital divide, access to financial services. Climate change is part of that role. So if we hear from the head of the ports along the Gulf about vulnerabilities and the need to spend substantial amount of money, I think we can play a role in the community by flagging those issues so people are aware of the need.
Awesome. So I have one more question, which is how can the city support the Federal Reserve Bank's sustainability goals moving forward? And then before you answer, I want to let the audience know that we're going to go into, you can ask basically whatever you want. So if you have questions, start putting them into the chat so that we can start to get them here. So while Rob's answering this question, audience, if you don't mind, start sending any other questions, any topic we've asked, or if there's something that we haven't asked, please send us your questions so we can continue the conversation, because we have about a few more minutes after Rob answers this last question from me to answer more questions from you all, the audience. So Rob, do you need me to re-ask the question?
No,
okay.
So I'd put it this way. Again, everything I'm working on, most of my breathing hours are focused on how do we get to full employment, how do we achieve price stability, and do both in a sustainable way, and how do we make sure there's financial stability, that we're actively assessing and managing tail risks in the economy so we can have sustainable, good growth, unemployment that gets to full employment and price stability. And so anything that goes on among community leaders, businesses, leadership from the city council to help that furthers those goals. And I think what you're doing on climate change and fostering that, and the opportunity it will create for new business. I'm thinking of this as a big opportunity. I think will help us achieve our dual mandate goals, and particularly be more likely that we achieve full employment.
Excellent, and I agree with that. I want to kind of go back to something you talked about earlier, which was about education and the digital divide and all of that, and how it impacts business. And again, we have to start working on it now. But if we're starting to think about our investment in, we have to start at kindergartners, right, and first graders. Well, that's about 15 to 20 years before they're in the actual full workforce, right? But you have to start the investment at some point. But what happens for our older students that are, in high school and maybe even college? How do we support them to get into these new industries and be prepared for these new industries that we probably weren't thinking about 15, 20 years ago in the education system and in our city levels?
So first order business, if that person with a high school education or less has not finished high school, okay, and they could be, are there vehicles we can create in the community to help them at least get a GED or some type of certification? Because when I talk to junior college superintendents, the one thing they do tell me is the bulk of their students need to be some type of certificate of either at least a GED. So I think If there's ways to do that, maybe people could do it at night in some other form. I actually think that's a key part. And then beefing up skills training. There is a skills gap in the United States. People don't realize, yes, there's a high unemployment rate right now, and we're working on getting that down, but there's also a skills mismatch. What do I mean by that? Something like 35% of all small businesses in the United States, and it's consistent with what we're seeing here, say they cannot find skilled workers. And I'm talking about automotive technicians, IT specialists, the whole range, and they're middle class jobs. They pay well. And so the challenge is how to get somebody who's working in a job where they're making less money, they don't have a skill, they're not satisfied with their income, they're struggling to make ends meet. How do we make it more available to them? If they're motivated to do it and want to do it, go for skills training so that they can move into more full-time employment at a much higher level of productivity and a higher level of income. Every one of those people we convert, it translates into higher GDP growth and more prosperity for all of us.
Well, that's the perfect segue into the next question, which is, what is your forecast for the United States GDP and for unemployment?
So I mentioned we think our best base case estimate is for GDP growth this year of 6.5%. We think the unemployment rate, which is right now in the range of 6%, is going to trend down and approach 4% by the end of this year. The more important indicator of labor market slack that I look at is in the lingo referred as U6, which is unemployed plus discouraged workers plus people working part-time who really want to work full-time. That right now is 10.7%. So we have a lot of room for improvement there. But I'm hopeful by the end of the year we will see that percentage grind down substantially, and so that's our outlook for the year. The only other thing people may ask about inflation, you're seeing and we are seeing a surge in year-over-year price increases. Okay, for a number of reasons. One, supply-demand shortages, logistics, supply chain problems. I mentioned one earlier with petrochemicals, and in addition. Prices were depressed last year, so the base effects year over year, but it will be attention getting that you'll see a meaningful price increase. The question, which the jury's out on, is whether that increase, that price adjustment in 2021 will go in, will there be more price increases in 22, 23, and so on, or whether that will settle down. And I think we're actively scrutinizing that.
Very good. And so the next question is from the audience. Patty D asks, wouldn't it have made more sense for the fossil fuel to have continued being drilled in the United States? For example, Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah, so I've said regularly, it's not only going to be smarter, it's going to be necessary to have substantial drilling in the United States for an extended period of time. Why? Even with the transition that we're making, and California going to no fossil fuel cars by the year 2035, even with all those mandates, we're going to be consuming substantial amounts and relying on substantial amounts of fossil fuel, not for years, but for decades. And so we need a healthy fossil fuel industry that's drilling. And that's become more challenging. And I mentioned lack of access to capital, other issues. So we're going to be relying on that industry to be healthy for an extended period. And if they don't do that, then you're going to have these price spikes for those of us who are still relying on fossil fuels, either in heating oil or other uses. We're going to have to face these price spikes. And so you want to be very mindful of that. This is a transition. The Keystone Pipeline is a separate issue. For better or worse, it's highly politically sensitive, so I'll probably stay away from it. But yes, the goal should be to intelligently do this transition, limit greenhouse gas emissions for the fossil fuel industry as much as possible while you're making the transition. And so each of these individual decisions have to be made intelligently with that prism in mind.
Excellent. And so the next question we have is from Tamara Cook, and it says, can Rob speak to the importance of water supply and how future projected changes in water supply, drought, and floods could impact economic models and supporting growth and unemployment? He has spoke to other elements that have impacts on these Federal Reserve goals, but I am curious how or if water is evaluated by the Federal Reserve in these efforts.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, and we've been working with Tom Luce, who many of you know, on his project to forecast what Texas is going to look like through 2036. And one of the things that we've seen is, well, this is one of the questions. I talk about infrastructure, water availability is part of that, and that's going to be a challenge. And we need to invest on that in that now and be aware of it. The other place we see it regularly in our work is back to fracking and the Permian Basin. Energy drilling, and that method of energy drilling uses a lot of water, has an impact on the water. Also, the use of sand and these other techniques. And so, yeah, there's got to be a lot of focus on use of water, having availability of water, and that's going to be a national and a global issue, and it's one that should be I think it already is a priority, and state leaders are aware of it, and we need to be very aware of it. So I agree with your question.
Yeah, and I agree with it as well. The City of Dallas, we own our water utility, and so one of the great things for Dallas that folks know is that the water flows in the City of Dallas, but we also have done really good things to help preserve our water source, as well as to make sure that we work with our biggest water users, and we've passed some ordinances that allow for those entities to be able to conserve water more and basically get a benefit from the city. And so that's some things that we're working on. But that's one of the things that we're really good at in Dallas is our water conservation. So those of you that are still living here in the City of Dallas and the businesses that are out there, keep doing the great work. We still have more to go, but we're one of the national leaders on water conservation here in the City of Dallas. So that makes me have a lot of pride for our city that we have a place where we do very well. So Rob, unfortunately our time is coming to a close, and this conversation has been really fantastic, and I've really learned a lot, and I've really enjoyed it. But I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to close out if you have any last comments before I close us out we unfortunately have to go to the next segment, even though I think I could talk to you for a whole another hour about the things we got to discuss. But please, if you don't mind closing us out.
So I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I enjoyed hearing the questions from the audience. Let me end here. I am very optimistic, as you've heard, about the future. First, the future of the country, but certainly the future of Texas, and the future of North Texas and this entire area. And there's a whole range of reasons why. But what I've learned, I've only lived here 5.5 years. I moved from the East Coast, and I came here in 2015 to take this job. But what I've learned is this city and this state is very good at calling out issues, even if they're sensitive, coming up with an action plan, and mobilizing the communities to take action. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to be a leader and grow in a very healthy way for years and years to come. And I think the key is, though, to call out these challenges. Climate change is one of them. Education is another, though. Lack of Wi-Fi and other infrastructure is another. And I found that this state is very good at facing those things, taking action. We will make our share of mistakes, but we learn from them and we move forward. So I appreciate your leadership, Councilman, and I appreciate the leadership of the city in facing these things and calling them out and not talking around them and saying, let's do some. And I think our population, I've learned, and our business community and other leaders respond very well to that, and they're ready to get in there and do what they need to do to contribute. And I've certainly put the Dallas Fed, we're looking forward to doing everything we can to help this city and the state achieve its goals.
And thank you again, Rob, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking your time to join us today. And also, I want to thank the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas for not just our recent partnerships, but our decades-long partnerships here in the city of Dallas. Without you all and your partnerships, you all help us to be a better Dallas. And I also want to thank all of our audience members out there for your great questions, your participation, which has really made this an even more exciting and educational conversation. With that, unfortunately, our segment has now ended, and it's time for me to pass it over to Director Gagne to take us into our next segment. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you both. What an amazing segment. Great information shared there. We're moving on to our next segment, and so it's going to be my pleasure to introduce this innovative panel of companies that will be moderated by the Honorable Sandy Grayson, former City of Dallas council member, having served District 12, and currently serving as our chair of the Environment and Sustainability Task Force. She was instrumental in helping us put together the CCAT, and during her time on the City Council was a leader on environmental issues. We are honored to have 6 distinguished panelists from companies that are leaders in their fields and also leaders in environmental sustainability. They will introduce themselves shortly. For this segment, Ms. Grayson will ask 2 rounds of questions, and then the panel will take questions from the audience. Ms. Grayson, I'm now giving the segment over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everyone. We've assembled an illustrious panel of environmental professionals to explore the nexus between climate change mitigation and economic implications. If you would each please introduce yourself and describe your company's current or planned sustainability or emissions reduction initiatives. And you'll each have 3 minutes. And we will start with Kevin Butt from Toyota.
Morning, everyone. What a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Sandy, for having me on this panel. At Toyota, we, if you don't know, we make cars. And we make a lot of cars. And our headquarters there in Plano, Texas. And, we have been working for quite some time on moving towards sustainable activities. I joined Toyota back in 1992. And from day one, it was all about how do we improve environmental performance. And we've continued in that. Back in 2015, we announced the Challenge 2050. We were one of the first companies to come out and talk about being zero carbon at that time, with 6 major challenges. One being reduction of our tailpipe emissions from our product by 90%. And second is engaging with our suppliers and having our suppliers also at zero carbon performance. We also have a water target for greatly reducing water consumption. We have a materials target from recycled materials to making chemically responsible products. And then last is a biodiversity target, where we firmly believe that we as a company are responsible for preserving ecosystems, not just around our facilities and manufacturing, but also engaging in world concerns. We've done work in the Galapagos. We've done work in the Northern Great Plains for preserving those areas. And we believe that's a big part of what we're doing. We realize that this is a huge problem. We're aligning ourselves with the Sustainable Development Goals as well, and moving to do what we can to improve that in that area as well. And with that, I will just leave it at that.
Thank you so much. And we will go next to Ushan Johi with Ericsson. I hope I pronounced your name right. I apologize if I didn't.
Yes, you did, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this amazing panel. So let me kind of get into it. So I'll start by talking a little bit about Ericsson. Ericsson is a company that was founded 140 years ago with the belief that access to communication is a basic human right. We're based today in about 180 countries, and 99,000 of our employees are focused on providing, ICT, information communications technology solutions to some of the largest mobile network operators globally. Here in Northeast Texas, you heard from AT&T, and they're based here in Texas and one of our key partners. Ericsson's company purpose is to empower an intelligent, sustainable, and connected world. We're focused on fully integrating sustainability into all aspects of our strategy and operations. My name is Bhushan Joshi, and I lead sustainability and corporate responsibility programs for Ericsson in North America. Ericsson's sustainability strategy has three key focus areas. The first one being corporate responsibility. Conducting business responsibly is a foundational element for Ericsson. Some of the key topics on which we work on within this is things like anti-corruption, respect for human rights, health and safety, well-being, and diversity and inclusion. One of our key targets under corporate responsibility are to reduce occupational health safety incidents, major occupational health safety incidents, by a minimum of 30% by 2022. And we report progress on these targets annually in our sustainability report. The second focus area for Ericsson is environmental sustainability. Being carbon neutral is a commitment that Ericsson has made for our company operations by 2030. This builds on top of the 1.5 degrees Celsius climate change science-based targets that Ericsson has already established. We are also focused on developing 5G products that are 10 times more energy efficient per data transfer by 2022. When we do our life cycle analysis, we understand that the biggest impact Ericsson has is not within our own footprint, but in the products when they're in the use stage with our customers like AT&T. We also focus a lot on trying to think about the exponential impact that information communications technology can have in helping all other sectors drive reductions in carbon emissions. We have partnered with the Exponential Climate Action Roadmap, which has looked into this exponential potential of the ICT sector. And what we have found is that even the existing ICT sector technologies can provide and enable other sectors to drive about 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions globally. So the ICT sector is a very great ROI when it comes to return that you get in terms of the enablement effect. The third key focus areas for Ericsson is digital inclusion. Addressing the digital divide is critical to ensuring that social inequities in our society are closed. We're all living through this COVID world right now, and we're speaking virtually. So in many ways, COVID has really accelerated digital transformation for just about everyone. We study from home, work from home. So digitalization and connectivity is a critical backbone for America. Our studies have shown that just a 10% increase in broadband connectivity can result in a 0.8% increase in GDP for the community. We have set a goal to connect 500 million more people by 2024 with mobile broadband rollout. The other aspect of this is the STEM talent gap. When you look at reports that come out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we see things like over the next decade, the US needs about 1 million more STEM professionals than what we will produce. So Ericsson is focused on working with nonprofit partners and community organizations within the US to deploy these STEM education programs that reach students from all backgrounds to really help address this talent gap. We're focused on this value chain approach because, like Shannon talked about and Rob talked about, achieving sustainable development is a approach. It's a team sport. We all are in this together. So we take a very value chain approach to this, and we focus on driving positive impact within our company operations, but also through our products, and then the impacts that we cause on the broader society. So I hope that gave you all a quick overview of who we are, what we do, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's move on to Hannah Walker with Sinclair.
Hi.
Ms. Walker? There you are.
Hey, Hi, so it's great to be here amongst everybody here. It seems like a great group of panelists. My name is Hannah Walker. I'm the vice president of a company called Sinclair Digital, LLC. And basically, our kind of slogan is that we're radically disrupting building infrastructure and operations. So we're hotel developers, but we're also design and consultants for buildings. And our main focus is to radically disrupt the change of using typical AC powered infrastructure and replacing it with a more efficient DC powered solution. And so what we found is that buildings take up about 40% of the world's energy emissions. 40% is quite a large amount. And the easiest way to try to cut down those emissions is by going to electrification, which can be substituted by much cleaner energies. But the problem is that building energy electrification is extremely inefficient because you have really great technology solutions like renewables, batteries, LEDs, all these things that are becoming more and more efficient, but we're still putting standard AC infrastructure in our buildings. And so a focus of our company is to design and build buildings on a full DC microgrid and be able to produce efficiencies that you cannot get with AC powered buildings. So, for example, our hotel that we just built in Fort Worth, Texas, we were able to use a low voltage DC solution using power over Ethernet, which is a PoE. You'll probably hear me talk about that a couple times. But with that solution, we were able to do all of the light fixtures, motorized window treatments, mini bars, and smart mirrors in the entire building with low voltage DC, which eliminated all the electrical labor for all those components, didn't require any permits. And we were able to save about 39% electrical energy consumption month to month, eliminate about half our circuit panels, and reduce our switchgear incoming from about 3,000 amps to 2,500 amps. So there's so many benefits from going towards a DC microgrid solution. And so we're focusing on, that's our focus for building and consulting for other projects and helping, the entire 40% building emissions to come down drastically.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to go to Amy King with Good Co-working. Amy?
Hi, my name is Amy King, and I am the co-founder of Good Co-working. We are a co-working space in Dallas, Texas that is focused on supporting impact-focused entrepreneurs or anyone who wants to grow a responsible business culture, a net positive impact in the world. So we are all about being a hub for businesses who can reduce their climate impact and make a more positive impact in the world. We have a business model where we're weaving in climate change mitigation strategies and focusing on our footprint overall, because we can have a ripple effect on budding businesses and help them learn to integrate sustainability strategies into their operating plan as they grow. And some of them are even tech companies, so you never know. We might have one in the house who turns into a big Facebook in the future. So it's really important that we incubate these ideas in Dallas-based businesses. And we also have a big reach in social media beyond Dallas. We are based in a building between Pelham and South Dallas on South Good Latimer, and we renovated a building. It's a green building. We're pursuing LEED certification and well building certification and many other certifications for our program. So we want to lead in that way for the business community in Dallas. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Yep.
So we will go now to Ariman Singhal with Sunrise Movement.
Hey everyone, can you hear me all right? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, my name is Ariman Singhal. I'm with the Sunrise Movement. Sunrise is a youth-led movement to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. And I think what I want to say in this group especially is that I think there's a mindset that has been kind of tied to sustainability as like it's something that is nice to do. It's something maybe that we have to do. And businesses are thinking about like, okay, what does that mean for our business model? What does that mean as more young people enter the workforce and have earnings and are looking to spend their money and care a lot about sustainability and the world that they're going to inhabit. But I think that that's actually not a good way of thinking about sustainability. I think about it as a giant opportunity. The world is changing, the political weather is changing. Joe Biden has put forward the largest investments in clean energy, mitigating climate change. And it's the direction the world is going. And businesses that understand that and shift their business models towards zero carbon products, toward helping other buildings, vehicles, et cetera, reach zero emissions are going to be the ones that are going to lead in the future. And those are going to be the companies that young people are going to want to work at. And so I think it's a tremendous opportunity for every single business right now to start making that transition, get out ahead of the curve, and be one of the leaders, because those are the companies that are going to be admired in the future, that are going to be highly sought after in terms of where people want to work. And it's not just a US-based thing. Once the US decarbonizes, the rest of the world is going to need to decarbonize as well. And so it's a great opportunity to develop products that can then be exported around the world. So I just want to present the amazing opportunity in front of all of us, and excited to work towards it. I think Sunrise works on sort of the political weather, for lack of a better word, just the way in which people think about climate change and really shifting the frame. And so I wanted to share that with you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Armin. Next, we're going to go to Meghna Thayer with the University of Texas at Arlington.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Hi, this is Meghna Thayer. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the University of Texas at Arlington. And thank you for having me here for this important discussion for the region. I feel good that an academic institution has a representation on this dialogue and, talk about climate change, because we are in the business of education and research and training the workforce of the future, not just on climate change, but on a variety of issues related to health science and food security and engineering. And so as the Chief Sustainability Officer for UT Arlington, I do sustainability in operations on campus and various programs related to energy efficiency, waste management, offering alternative transportation options to our students, a lot of education and outreach, but I also focus on incorporating sustainability in the curriculum. So how do you get the students energized and pay attention to not just climate change, but everything related to sustainability, including social equity, which is such an important part of the discussion as it comes to climate change. And then UTA also works with a lot of organizations outside of our campus, like North Central Texas Council of Governments, City of Dallas, private sector. We work with Toyota, we work with Schneider Electric, we work with Bhushan on this regional center of expertise for education on sustainable development. So I do feel that the region as a whole can learn a lot from the United Nations framework, the UN SDGs, and kind of move the needle for the region using the SDGs 3, 4, 11, and 13, good health and well-being, quality education, sustainable communities, and climate change. So we have this consortium of public sector, private sector, nonprofit organizations where we are trying to educate the people about sustainable development goals and sort of a cross-collaborative approach, capacity building, regional partnership to advance sustainability in the region and support dialogues on important issues like climate change for the region. And as part of this, we also have a youth network where we, support youth of the region, not just at UTA, but various other academic institutions in the region to talk about climate change, to do something about climate change, host events, publications, help improve the air quality for the region, a variety of things. And so I'm very happy to be part of this discussion because I think academic institutions bring a lot of expertise of faculty, but also a lot of passion and energy of the students. And I think that really helps the region contribute to this valuable dialogue on climate change. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Meghna. Now I'm going to ask each of you in turn a question. So let's start back with Kevin. And Kevin, Toyota is known for having a culture of quality and innovation. Does the corporate culture make Toyota more effective at planning and implementing actions for climate change? And if you could give some examples, that would be great. Do you want me to repeat?
Oh, sorry. I had the mute button on. I'm sorry.
Oh, the dreaded mute button. Okay.
Sorry about that. Toyota is the corporate culture within Toyota. You're right. It's about making a product that people want to have and can have for a long time. But in order for us to do that, we have lots of in-house processes and procedures. And those include those things that we're talking about here today, centered around how do we reduce our footprint. We have a term called MUDA, and that's waste. And the Toyota culture has been centered around that since the day one. And it's a part of the DNA in which we do our business. And, when we start talking, sustainability has been a word that's been tossed around for a long time. But I can tell you that throughout my career at Toyota, the culture has always been that of centered around how do we make ourselves more efficient, therefore reducing our waste, reducing energy and water consumption, and being someone that can add value to the community, not just in economics, but in the way that we do business and how we can share our ideas. We're big into sharing with our supply base, all the things that we have learned. And so, for example, we are now working with all of our supply base and those that are particularly want it, and helping them understand how they can invest in do renewable energy projects and how they can reduce the demand of power at their sites through the things that we've already done. And we're encouraged to do that through our own corporate culture and one also training our team members in the culture to, take what we learned at Toyota and use it at home, but also use it to influence what goes on in your neighborhood. So I think we've been long in this process, and I think we're making great strides.
Okay, thank you. Ushan, what is Ericsson's sustainability and corporate responsibility strategy? Can you talk about the key programs, goals, and examples? And what are some examples of your strategy in action within the DFW Metroplex?
Yeah, no, thanks, Sandy. Great question. So I kind of talked about this a little bit before, but, so we have kind of three key focus areas. First one being around corporate responsibility and, focusing on really driving down major incidents that happen within, with our employees. So reducing major incidents. The second one is around environmental sustainability. So really focusing on driving, towards being a carbon neutral company for our company operations by 2030. And a way that I think you can really see this within the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is the Ericsson USA 5G Smart Factory right here in Louisville, Texas. This factory has been operational for now for about a year. It's a 300,000 square foot facility right here in Louisville. It is a major component of Ericsson's investment in North America. Our corporate headquarters, of course, here are based in Plano, Texas, which is where I work from when I'm not working from home. For the 5G Smart Factory, we're pursuing LEED Gold and LEED Zero Carbon certifications. This smart factory has recently been recognized by the World Economic Forum as a global lighthouse, really showcasing how the fourth industrial revolution needs to happen and the fact that we're a global frontrunner at this facility. What we've done is we've integrated our commitments to sustainability and climate action into all aspects of this facility, from design, construction to operations. And I think some of the key design achievements that I can talk about right now are that the factory is designed to be up to 24% more energy efficient than a comparable building. We have on-site solar panels that produce about 17% power that the factory needs on site. We have, and to put this in context, that will be enough power to supply about 93 US homes, with renewable energy for a year. We have on-site rainwater tanks that collect about 40,000 gallons of water. We treat it and we reuse it. And when we do that, it allows us to reduce our indoor water consumption by approximately 75%, which is a big reduction, especially being where we are and kind of drought prone. We are also not limiting ourselves to the power, green or renewable power produced on site. So any power that we cannot produce on site, we're powering our factory or purchasing 100% Green E certified renewable energy Texas wind directly from the utility. We also have 8 EV charging stations that we have installed at the facility that are available to all our employees and also visitors at no cost. So this really is, demonstrating how, the industrial sector, which represents about 32% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, can decarbonize, meet business objectives, and then meet sustainability objectives at the same time. So that's on climate. I talked a little bit about digital inclusion and why it's so important to make sure that we bridge the digital divide, but then also how we make sure that, we educate the workforce of the future. To have those STEM competencies that they need to work with companies like us, Toyota, and others that work that are here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We have focused and have been working with the Girl Scouts, the Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas. They have a STEM pledge, a pledge to put 2.5 million girls into a progressive STEM pipeline by 2025. Ericsson has provided connectivity to the Girl Scouts STEM Center of Excellence in South Dallas. It's called the Whispering Camp Whispering Cedars. I've been down there. It's a 90-acre living lab that provides hands-on STEM experiences to girls. My daughter is a Girl Scout, so I really love to take her there. We're also just recently introduced a 5G IoT patch. So Girl Scouts can learn about 5G IoT technology, what it means, what opportunities does it provide them to, to create the future, to create the sustainable future that we all need. So, these are kind of 2 examples, Sandy, of how our strategy is being reflected right here within the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
Thank you. I've been to the camp too, the Girl Scout camp, and it is impressive. Yes. Hannah, could you tell us if there was one action you would recommend that a business can take that would both help with climate change and help the business bottom line, what would that be?
So a lot of the things that we're pushing, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is trying to redesign the way we think about buildings and the way we think about constructing buildings to make them a lot more efficient by using DC power and other types of DC power, whether it's class 2 power or class 1 power. And we know that changing the entire way the building is construction, just because it's more efficient, for a business case isn't really enough. We're developers, we understand that just because something's more sustainable or more efficient, it doesn't mean that every developer is going to then pick it up and make that their model, because it costs more and things like that. And so one of the things that we're really trying to do with our partners, we partner a lot with LG and Cisco and Kohler and some other companies like that make products, is make as many products as we can work on class 2 or low voltage DC power. And so I mentioned earlier that we were able to convert a bunch of our products in our building to work on class 2 power. And so that allows the labor rates to be extremely lower, because you're allowed to use low voltage installation capabilities as opposed to electrical licensed electricians. It also makes a lot of the products a lot more simple, so they last longer. For example, LED lights, they're all natively DC powered on the inside, but we're still powering them with 120 volt AC power, which adds heat when you convert that to AC to DC. So then you're adding heat into that light fixture and causing it to be less efficient over time. And so those are ways that we're pushing to make the bottom line dollar actually makes sense for the owner. We were able to, in our hotel property, we were actually able to capture about 16% CapEx savings. You know, we're always talking about efficiency and sustainability after the fact, but the question is always, you know, what's my ROI? And so what we're trying to say and what we're trying to push is that this can be less expensive upfront and give you an amazing energy savings over time by doing some of the technologies that we're pushing in our buildings. So I guess back to your question, you said, what's the one thing that, you know, you'd suggest for business? And I would say that if you are interested in energy efficiency, sustainability, and other things like health and wellness for your tenants and your guests, start to think about DC technology and maybe finding a partner that can help you when you do a renovation or when you build a new building, you know, be able to utilize some of this technology that, yes, is sustainable and efficient, but can also save you time and money on the CapEx side as well.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Amy, good co-working puts emphasis on sustainability and being a positive force in the community. What are some of the ways that a local business can contribute to their local community, and why is it important for them to do so?
Well, I think, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, just making sure I put my earbuds in. What I think businesses can do is they can make sure that it's tied to their value and mission. So first step would be for a company to take a good look at its values and tie in any community engagement into their specific values and goals. So that way it's a strategic endeavor instead of just saying, oh, I think we'll do some recycling or something like that. Impact and sustainability are two of our values. So we've focused on creating strategic partnerships that with businesses that check those boxes for us around sustainability and impact. And when we talk about impact, we're talking about broader community impact. You know, some of the things that that Mr. Kaplan was talking about earlier in terms of creating more access and more opportunities for people from all areas of our city. So we work on attracting community and impact-focused businesses and nonprofits to our space. Use the space to hold even events, and they also use our office space. So we have, while we're a small business, we have the ability to create that broader ripple effect across the Dallas area. And so every business is different, but I say engage your employees in figuring out strategic ways to engage the community. It can be so much more than just one annual volunteer event with your company. It can be a great way to retain employees. And on a human level, it's so rewarding. We make new connections with future customers and people from all walks of the business community and the nonprofit community and beyond. And of course, if you do it authentically as a business, it's good PR and a good way to market your company is to live your values and to really communicate that.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Sure.
Ariman, community groups played a critical role in the development and implication of the CCAP, which is Dallas's Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. So let me ask you, how do you get businesses to change their practices and methods while still maintaining a positive relationship? This was a key to working with the City of Dallas. Can this model be effective in other areas?
I mean, yeah, I think so, Sandy. I think that the opportunity, like I said in my opening statement, I think the world is shifting, and I think the businesses that take notice of that shift and move with it and push that shift forward themselves are going to be the ones that are leading the way in the future. And so I'm really excited for businesses to see addressing climate change as an opportunity. It's a new growth area for businesses. We can change some of our zoning rules to have more mixed use development, more walkable neighborhoods. Our air is going to be cleaner. That's going to improve a lot of socioeconomic indicators around health and asthma. And Dallas ISD, asthma is the leading cause of absenteeism. And there's been some conversation around needing to train the next generation workforce for the jobs we need. And that asthma is a huge barrier. So I think there's so much opportunity to move into the future and just overall live in a better world where we have clean air, we have clean water, our neighborhoods are walkable, there's more greenery, more trees, more shade, more parks, and we're more resilient to the climate impacts that are already happening. And so I think my goal is to really help people envision what that looks like, and think about it as a win-win. And so like, what I imagine for myself is, 5 years from now, I'd like to live in a neighborhood where I can walk down a wide sidewalk to an electric bus and hop on. And before that, I had made my coffee in an electric kind of stove pot thing that I can program from my phone, just grab it on the way out the door. As I'm walking to that bus stop, there's a community garden that I can walk by and say hello to a neighbor at, maybe pick up some fresh food at. And I think that already exists in a lot of small pockets of Dallas, of the world, and it's really just an opportunity that we have to be bold about what the future could look like and have that on a much larger scale. And I'm hopeful for businesses to lead the way. And I think the ones that do are going to be the ones that are best off.
Thank you, Ariman. Meghna, one area that UTA is well known for is providing training for skilled STEAM jobs. How do you continue to stay evergreen at all levels to meet the demand of a skilled workforce for this job market that is transitioning to more green industry jobs and less traditional jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, Ayushman was talking about this haven, and, I recently listened to a podcast which was talking about how the U.S. needs to create these climate havens. And the name that was proposed was like Leaside Haven, where everything's perfect. Like you said, you can walk to a grocery store, take light rail, you can buy healthy food, you have good air quality. And so since we are in the business of education, I think it's our job to make sure we provide the resources to people to bring that about. And so I always believe that in the world of sustainability and the bigger conversation of climate change, you really have to tell people, tell them what you are going to tell them, right? And then tell them what you just told them. And I see that you have to practice that with students, especially because once you open their eyes to this world of education on climate change and sustainability, they are unstoppable, right? They are our future. And so UTA has kind of tapped into that enthusiasm and motivation, and we do a lot of partnership with for STEM Academy, with Arlington ISD. We have done some partnership and agreements with the City Lab High School in Dallas. We have an Honors Academy, which kind of provides leadership training to the students. We have a TRIO pre-college program, which is providing the educational talent for the region, but specifically for green jobs. So we offer a lot of research development and summer camps for students to come and participate and learn through engineering or through the College of Business or College of Liberal Arts. So you are part of the discussions from everything from engineering to social equity, which I think is really important in this conversation about climate change. And then, like I mentioned, we have this regional center of expertise for education and sustainable development, where we are trying to bring the youth in the conversation, right? Offer trainings and programs on how do you advance your goals, your personal goals or your regional goals towards sustainability and climate change. And so some of the things that we are offering are starting in the month of May, we are actually offering, UT has partnered with ICLEI USA to offer an SDG cohort, where we have City of Dallas as one of the partner, where what we are going to do is help local governments align their sustainability goal and strategies to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? So City of Dallas has this comprehensive climate change plan. They have done a lot of work, and now is the time to align that with the global framework of SDG. So we are going to do that. And we have hosted a lot of educational conferences. 2 years ago, we had a big watershed urbanism conference. I think that's a really important conversation for Dallas, where we have the Trinity River. So we had a whole day of conference where we invited research experts to talk about on what the city of Dallas or the region as a whole can do to advance conservation in the region as far as the Trinity is concerned. We have partnered with a lot of nonprofit organizations to do some research projects, and we have had students do the work. So we have provided kind of a training and graduate student assistantships to students to work on this critical projects related to climate change and broader sustainability. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you. Very thoroughly. Yes. Thank you very much. We think maybe now we'd like to open it up to some questions from the audience. Katie, do we have any questions from the audience?
It looks like they're just starting to come in, so I think we might have time for a few more of the roundtable questions, if you'd like, Ms. Grayson.
Okay. Well, let's go back to Kevin with Toyota and ask him, and you talked a little bit about this, I think, Kevin, how does climate change impact your supply chain? And what are some mitigation steps? And does Toyota have an eye on Texas as a resource or solution?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I started to talk about this. One of the things that we have within Toyota's framework to hold ourselves accountable is, we work through 5-year action plans, environmental action plans. And a part of those action plans, one of the things that we've talked about is our supply chain. And what we have done is reached out to our suppliers, and we've asked them for a 2% year-over-year reduction in their carbon footprint. And they report that out to us. So we're asking them to help us achieve total carbon reduction throughout the entire supply chain. So those steps, and again, as I said earlier, we're helping them do that. We're not just asking the question, but we're actually providing a platform by which we can share best practices, learn from each other, and also share cost where appropriate. Because this is one of those things that we have to think about cost and cost effectiveness here too. And sometimes we need to be creative in how we think about cost. The carbon return on investment is a new term that people are starting to use instead of just return on investment and the weighted average of capital. So, a lot of things are changing, and about how people and the C-suite actually looks at this across the company. So the mitigation steps that we're looking at are sharing virtual power purchase agreements. How do we get those done? How can we move the supply base as well as our own companies into this carbon neutral space through a portfolio of options, right? I think one of the things that's really important is every act of conservation matters, right? It's that simple. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but every act that we perform adds value. And then as we add that value, things become larger in scale if we share those. So to me, that's one of the most important things that we can do. And to your last question, you have an eye on Texas as a resource or solution. Well, obviously, we have our corporate headquarters there, and we believe Texas can be a part of the solution. And learning from what we've heard today, not just from this panel, but from others, there appears to be a great step forward. And I look forward to working with Dallas and the city of Plano and everybody in that area to try to increase our knowledge, but also to increase the action items that we take.
Thank you, Kevin. Bhushan, what messages would you like to share with local business on how to move toward a more climate-friendly business model?
Yeah, great question, Sandy. So, a couple of thoughts. Small and medium-sized enterprises, local businesses, are a big part of any economy. When you look at some of the statistics from the World Bank, in both the developing and the developed world, they provide small and medium-sized businesses, create lots of job opportunities within local communities. So they're truly economic powerhouses when you think about it that way. But decarbonization of the small and medium-sized enterprises is critical if we as a society are going to achieve net zero carbon goals. And we understand that, and we understand that the need to work within our supply chain and work with our suppliers to achieve this net zero objective. So what Ericsson has done is we've joined what's called a 1.5 degrees Celsius supply chain leaders organization. We're joined in this by global brands like IKEA, Unilever, Nestle, among others. And this group has launched what's called a SME Climate Hub, or a small and medium enterprises climate hub. What it does is it provides a one-stop shop for SMEs to make climate commitments, but then not just make commitments, but have access to best-in-class tools and resources that they can leverage to really get started on their climate journey. And then finally, get the recognition they deserve. Companies like Ericsson and Toyota are really focused on, creating incentives for our supply chain partners to work with us. And so do our customers. So like AT&T, they have goals focused on supply chain sustainability. So the way this SME Climate Hub works is, small, medium-sized enterprises can access this. It's online. You take the first action of making a commitment to start the journey. Once you do that, you get access to all sorts of tools, that are state-of-the-art that cover everything from how do you, establish your business strategy and integrate that with sustainability and climate action. What sort of action should you take to reduce your own carbon emissions? And most of these tools are free. And once you start on this journey, you also get the opportunity to get recognized by the UN Race to Zero campaign. And what that does is that it gives your business the visibility in both your community and also with customers and clients that you interact with, which really creates an incentive to make this transition. So I would really encourage people to go take a look at this SME Climate Action Hub, browse through some of the tools that are available, and I really hope that you can find something really actionable that you can use to get started on your climate journey. I hope that answers your question, Sandy.
It did. Thank you. Thank you, Bhushan. Hannah, do you have examples that illustrate how new technologies can have a beneficial economic and climate impact on business?
Sure. So we talked a little bit about some of the steps that we've done to utilize PUE power to make that bottom line for companies a lot more incentivized, so where it actually does make business sense to convert their buildings or their new remodels to run on a more sustainable, efficient solution. Another thing that we were able to accomplish is in our project at the Sinclair, we're able to influence several large companies to create new products to work with a low voltage DC solution. And one of the business reasons that it makes sense for a company that is a global producer of manufacturing, such as Somfy, for example, they're a large manufacturer of motors. And so one of the reasons that we asked them, we have this vision of doing a DC sustainable building. We'd like you to make a PUE version of your motors. And one of the reasons that it makes so much business sense is because a company like Somfy ships products all over the world. And all over the world, there's different types of electrical requirements. United States has different electrical requirements as Europe and Asia. And that's why you always have to have those converters when you travel overseas. And so from a business manufacturing standpoint, PUE, power over Ethernet, is actually a global standard all over the world. So they can make one motor and send it anywhere in the world. And because they saw that as a great opportunity, they said, it makes sense, we're going to put this product on the line. And so we were able to do that with Somfy, with LG, with multiple companies that were able to create these new products. So I think it's about not only having a vision of sustainability and efficiency, but also make those business sense for large companies to manufacture. And we've kind of been an advocate to larger companies to make newer products, to rethink about how they're doing their business. LG, for example, right now is going to make an entire line of DC appliances so that all of the, your stove, your washer dryer can all be powered with DC energy instead of AC power. We're also working on them making an entire HVAC system, all working off of DC power. So in that case, if you have the lighting, you have the HVAC, you have your ceiling fans and your motorized window treatments, you don't even need an electrician in the ceiling at all. You can have a low voltage installer do all those things. And so there's so many ways that we're trying to push, making it a really strong business case to be efficient and be sustainable. And I hope I answered your question. I think I jotted off a little bit, but
no, thank you. No, full of information. Thank you. Amy, can you tell us how has being an environmentally and community positive business benefited good co-working?
Sure. I think first off, it's been a differentiator for us in the future work. And as you know, a lot of businesses are changing how they work. Everyone's been working at home, and when people come back, their office footprints are being reduced. So corporations are even considering sending their employees to co-working spaces. So being impact and sustainability focused really helps us stand out with people who care about the purpose of their work. And so that's really important differentiation. Being also inclusive and having more diversity has helped our business. We are, I mentioned earlier that we're geographically positioned between South Dallas and downtown. And that allows us to be a bridge for anything from environmental justice in South Dallas to being a place for an accelerator called Impact Ventures that is focused on minority and women-owned businesses in tech. And so we're really convening a lot of those conversations, and that brings people who are interested in being making more of an impact. It really has transformed our business. So including sustainability in our core mission is critical, and we tell that story, so we attract a lot of customers who are interested in it. And drawing the like-minded organizations, like we have a lot of member organizations who are also focused on sustainability, so our impact can be augmented together. We have Turn Compost in our building. They just got the contract for the DFW airport composting, and so they provide our composting services. We have several renewable energy brokers and organizations, and we continue to attract a lot of passionate voices in the city. So it benefits us by sharing the message of being green and educating those who come in to what green choices mean for their business and how they impact the environment. And when we're sharing this with our community of businesses and individuals who want to be part of that mission, we leverage our own business's voice. And so I think really in the end, it's really about including everything in our mission and feeling, we are rest assured that we profit by doing the right thing. And so as we attract customers who are interested in what we're doing, it benefits our business. So it's really a win-win.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Araman?
Yeah.
What role do community groups play in making changes to benefit the climate and environment?
Sandy, is it okay if I address some of the questions in the chat?
I think after this round, then we can.
Okay. Yeah, I think what role do community groups play? I mean, I think one of the challenges in the climate movement for a long time has been focusing on animals and ice in Antarctica and polar bears and things like that. And I think what a community group can really bring to the conversation is how this is affecting people in their everyday lives and how it's affecting communities and neighborhoods. That makes it much more real, because it's certainly there's effects, all over the world. But the most, I personally care a lot about the climate, not because of the ice and the polar bears as much as it does matter. I care about the climate because when I was growing up, I would visit my family in India, and we didn't have clean, reliable drinking water. And I always, that showed me how much the environment affects our everyday lives. And I wanted to work on climate change because I see a future where, we don't have the rain we need. The water infrastructure we've built doesn't actually support the society or the cities that we live in. And I always assumed that was far away, but with the freeze, I mean, we saw how, over a couple days, people lost water for a long period of time and how real that impact is for people. And I think community groups have a role in connecting the dots for people between something that is like very scientific, hard to understand, and just what it means to people in their day-to-day lives.
Thank you, Armin. Meghna, if a high school senior was interested in climate change as a career, study climate, or if they wanted to work in a field that was beneficial to mitigating or predicting climate, how would you advise him or her to move forward?
Yeah, there are lots of ways to do that. You know, we get inquiries from students who are interested in working not just on climate change, but say clean air. So we do have a lot of faculty experts on campus. We actually have a climate research group on campus, which includes a range of faculty who are dedicated and devoted towards research towards climate change. And so if, for example, they reach out to us, we partner them with these faculties, and, you know, they can work on research project independently. But we also have a very strong service learning project initiative on campus where we match faculty with outside entities, organizations who are looking to get some help on student involvement, so the students can be part of that. Through our Leadership Academy, we have done that, the summer camps, the STEM Academy that we have, but also the youth network that I mentioned. You know, just a few days ago, a student from a high school in Carrollton reached out to me and said, hey, I'm very interested in clean air. And he has actually developed an app and a website and a really cool model on how to educate the communities about good air quality. And I said, why don't you come to UTA? We are planning for a youth summit, sometimes late summer, early fall. And we would love for you to present your case, because I want to provide all these passionate students a platform for not just to put forward their ideas, but also give them an opportunity to collaborate with other people, right? So they can be part of EPA's, say, Food Recovery Challenge Network, or they can be part of some of the initiatives that are going on through the Office of Sustainability. So it's just a matter of pairing them with the faculty experts and their area of interest, but UTA does offer a lot of these formal platforms where students can engage.
So this opportunity in the summer, do you notify high schools that it's coming up?
Yeah, we have lots of summer camps for high school students, yes. And I know Bhushan talked about the Girl Scouts of North Texas. So we do work with them. They are a stakeholder in the Regional Center of Expertise that we have, where, you know, we actually helped host a big conference for them last year, and we have ongoing discussion with them. We partnered with GEMIN, the United Nations model for educating students about sustainability. So there are lots of platforms. It really depends on what they are interested in. And I really strongly believe in it, that students should be given a chance to take their passion forward, because a couple of months ago, National Academy of Sciences issued a report where they were talking about how do you advance sustainability in the curriculum and student engagement, and how sustainability should be part of the core curriculum to educate the student, not just through college and high school, but K through 12. And that's, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much. So now, Katie, I believe we'll go to the chat questions or the Q&As that have come in.
Yes, so I'm going to go in order that they were submitted, and I may combine some that have similar questions. So if you submitted a question, just please be patient, and we will get to them, as many as possible. I think we have about 15 minutes. So the first question,
Katie, could I ask you, is everyone on the panel just could jump in if they feel like they have an answer to this question?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. It works for me if that's how we want to do it. Absolutely. So the first question came from Max Bell. Can the panel please comment on simple, cost-effective, sustainable measures like rewilding private and public land resources and preventing counterproductive mowing, raking, pesticide, and herbicide application? These measures are shown to reduce erosion, flooding, and summer peak temperatures, as well as restore habitat for wildlife. And he's asking specifically in Dallas, but I know we have panel from outside of Dallas as well. Let me know if I need to repeat any part of that.
Well, I'll take a quick stab at that. Yeah, I think from as I said earlier, we're very focused on biodiversity, and at our facilities, we firmly try not to mow our grass. We actually, if you look at our Dallas headquarters, that old property, except for a very small part, is planted in native plants, drought-resistant plants from Texas. And then we follow those practices with no pesticide, herbicide use to make sure that we're following those practices. And we do that at all of our facility, where we try to, and also put in pollinator gardens, as well as other areas that we can encourage, and help the migration paths of certain species, but as well, it's a very cost-effective way to reduce maintenance. That's the benefit, right? Not only are you getting the biological benefit, you're getting the cost benefit. And I'll give one plug. There's Supplier Partnership for the Environment is a group of OEMs that are working together on these issues for biodiversity. And we actually now have plotted across North America, where all these automakers are working together, all these plots of land that are planted in either pollinator gardens or some form of habitat that allow for a continuous migration path across North America for these species. So yes, I agree, it's cost effective, and the more suppliers and the more companies we get involved in things like this, the greater impact we're going to have on the things that were mentioned in the question.
Great. We have another question, Ms. Grayson, and this is from Gwendolyn Isak-Pan. I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name, I'm sure. In terms of social equity, what has your firm specifically implemented to reduce the impact of climate change on the Black and Brown communities in the DFW area? And this was not directed at anyone specifically. Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in on this one. We've made diversity and inclusion a real core part of our values, and I'm really proud that we have approximately 50% African American and women-owned businesses and organizations in our space, and we've engaged a lot of organizations that are active in South Dallas and West Dallas and other areas where there has been less opportunity. So we're conveners of the discussions, and I think some of the organizations do engage in climate change issues, along with air quality issues like downwinders at risk. So we're trying to be a place to have those conversations and support organizations that are focused on those efforts. And I would love to see us partnering with corporations to kind of augment our programming in that area in the future. And also we'll continue to support Impact Ventures on their efforts in helping impact-oriented ventures.
If I may jump in real quick, I wanted to kind of point out one thing. So Erickson, we've started a partnership with the Melville Family Foundation that are based here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we're really focused on the South Dallas region, working with them and then with the Uplift school system. With our research, we see that the digital divide is a big topic, in South Dallas, and Dallas is one of the, metroplexes that comes in the top 7 most unconnected cities. So we're working on initiatives there. But with the Melville Family Foundation, we last year donated laptops to students so that they can have access to technology as they're working from home. So some initiatives that we're starting now to focus on some of the social issues, nothing specific to climate, but so far it's been focused on the social issues. I think more from an urgency point of view with COVID happening and some of the initiatives that we've taken on as a result of that.
I'll add to that too. And, we're also working in the South Dallas area, and we're actually opening up a new STEM school in South Dallas, helping to sponsor, to do that, and working on food deserts and things of that nature. But it's also a part of how we do our, I'll give a quick example. When we recently went out for bids for our virtual power purchase agreements, the first 3 criteria were whether it was in a community that was underserved, and was it how was the economic benefit going to impact that underserved community, and or what was the unemployment rate like in that area, and could we employ people that were displaced? So, I mean, those are the things that I think we can continue to work on as corporations to improve and the footprint.
Katie, do we have another question?
Yes, I was just making sure no one else wanted to chime in. Thank you so much. So we have another question, and this is from Richard Wayne. It says, perhaps Ariman, but any panelists, there's been a great deal of progress in the climate change area, but we need to significantly accelerate the conversation and actions. How do we accomplish that?
Yeah, Richard, that's a great question, and I'm going to loop in a part of the answer, I think, for the previous question as well. So, you know, as probably you all know, we have 9 years to reduce our carbon emissions in half around the world, which in the US means we need to be moving as fast as possible, 80 to 100% in the next 10 years. And also we have an issue of there not being a lot of good jobs right now coming out of COVID, especially young people. It's the time of the year where people are graduating from college or grad school and looking for jobs and taking on jobs as servers and other things that really don't match the skill sets that they have. And there's also a great opportunity because there's so much work to be done to stop climate change. And so we're supporting a federal jobs guarantee policy at the federal level. This is something similar to the military, where if you want to be part of the military, you have the option to do that. You get paid and you know, make the country better. And I think this is so critical. In the freeze, people died in their own homes, the one place where you're supposed to be safe. And these types of impacts are only going to get worse and worse. And so a jobs guarantee provides that opportunity to make people's lives better and address kind of the challenges of climate change and move us into a more positive vision that I described earlier. And at Sunrise, we are very focused on racial justice and economic inequality as part of our solutions. And so making sure these are good jobs, pay living wages with benefits that provide people the option to be in a union if they choose, that's really critical because that's going to provide society, it's just going to improve our society. And I think this last year has really shown that society has a lot of challenges. So that's the policy we're supporting to really accelerate progress and to address some of the social economic issues that have become much more clear to folks in this past year.
Yeah, maybe I could jump in and add a little bit more, you know, on building, just kind of building on top of what Ariman, you were saying, you know, so the science is clear, right? So what we need to do is in this decade, we need to cut emissions by half and then keep doing that and cutting emissions by half until we reach net zero by 2050. So that's the target that we need to achieve. Now, that means that the biggest reduction needs to happen in this decade, right? So we understand that this exponential transformation needs to happen in our economy in order to achieve this objective. So what Ericsson has done is we've partnered with an organization called the Exponential Climate Action Roadmap. And what they have done is they've developed specific solutions, or they're not developed, but they've identified specific solutions that, you know, that each sector, like energy, industry, transportation, can deploy to cut their emissions by 50% in this decade. And what's really interesting is that all of these solutions are existing. So there's no silver bullet that we need to go find. These solutions exist. We just need to deploy them and take exponential climate action. And I think, you know, technology has a key role to play in this transformation. So this research through the Exponential Climate Action Roadmap or Summit has shown us is that, you know, the ICT sector, while accounts only for 1.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, has the potential to enable up to 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And we can do that by enabling, you know, sectors like industrial sector or sectors like the power sector. You know, Rob talked a little bit about the transformation that needs to be happening in order to transition towards a renewable energy grid. You know, as more renewable resources come online, when we have, you know, friends like AT&T who have goals to go, you know, fully renewable, right? All of this demand is creating more renewable energy assets. And when you have that, what needs to happen is that you need utility grids that are smart, that are connected, that are digitized. And that's, I think, where the ICT sector or the information communications technology sector can play a transformative role, providing the grid operators the ability to connect, to be able to balance the supply and demand of power, and really help us have a stable grid, but then also transition towards a renewable grid. So, that's kind of where we have thrown our focus, because this is not something that we can achieve Ericsson can achieve within our own, four walls or within our own industry. We need to work with partners who use our technology, who could leverage our technology and drive greater reductions in carbon emissions. So, I'm super proud of the work we're doing there. And this information is available publicly, and there's a event happening next week. We don't have time, and it's available, so feel free to join in. We have some great speakers from Ericsson kind of covering about this topic, and other speakers as well. Thank you.
If I may add, Sandy?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so,
just really quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry,
yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Amy? Oh, okay.
Okay, just really quickly, I wanted to advocate that we all, as business owners and corporate leaders, start using the word phrase climate emergency, because I think someone in the audience mentioned that earlier, and I think it's important that we escalate it a little bit. But I also want to mention an organization that meets out of our headquarters called Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, and that's something anyone can get involved in as a citizen. It's bipartisan, and they have conversations that they and specific campaigns that they engage in with legislators. So that's one way to interact with the government on an individual level, and also you can support the work of CCL.
Thank you. Meghna, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to put forward, a collaborative initiative that UTA is part of, which is the North Texas Center for Mobility Technologies. And it's a collaborative partnership, which kind of brings coordinated expertise to the DFW region, of research universities to tackle the mobility issues and challenges facing North Texas. And so this center is actually focused on autonomous vehicle, 5G, electric motors, micromobility, drones, a variety of research initiatives that you can reach out to the faculty expert, because a couple of universities in the region are part of this mobility center, UTA, UTD, UNT, and SMU. So you can reach out to us, and we'll match you with the faculty experts to develop your project ideas. And this is done in partnership with North Central Texas Council of Governments. So there is some funding available if you provide the matching funds. But I think this is a really good sort of a model to put forward to address the transportation needs of the region and to help, because everybody knows transportation is such a big part of the puzzle of the whole climate change discussion. And with the doubling of the population in North Texas from 7.5 million right now to where it's going to be double in 2050, how do you tackle that problem? So I think innovation and technology, and Bhushan talked about the fourth industrial revolution, which World Economic Forum has been doing a lot of work. But at a micro level, at a regional level, I think the Center for Mobility Technologies really offers the solution that the region needs. So just wanted to throw it out there.
No, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to say to the panelists, thank you all so much for participating today in our symposium. You've given us so much good information, and we really appreciate that you gave us your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson, and all the panelists today for being here. It's been a great conversation, a lot of great information shared. Couldn't without y'all. We've enjoyed hosting today, and we look forward to doing this again in 2022. We had one more segment to cover. To wrap up today, I'm going to welcome my colleague, Sue Alvarez. She's the Assistant Director of the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability here at the City of Dallas. She was instrumental and a key member during the implementation and ultimate adoption of our CCAP, and she wasted no time getting into the implementation of that CCAP. So without further ado, here is Ms. Alvarez.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. First of all, thank you for bravely stepping in to MC today when staff asked. My first huge thanks goes to our staff, our fabulous staff in the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability who have been working so hard at pulling together today's event. I think you will agree that they've done a wonderful job of getting some really interesting panelists that kind of jogged our thoughts out of status quo. There's so much out there that we could be doing. I think we probably could stretch the conversation today into about a week and still be diving in on things that are critically interesting and critically important. I also really want to thank Councilmember Omar Narvaez for his leadership today and every day with the Environment and Sustainability Committee. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and thank Honorable Sandy Grayson, who has led environmental efforts in the city for several decades and is currently leading our task force. And I think this is her 4th climate symposium that she has participated in, and we're grateful to her for her efforts on behalf of the environment. One other thing that I really want to do is thank both Shannon Carroll and Rob Kaplan and all of our fabulous speakers today. They've given us a whole lot to be thinking about as we move forward. So if you are like a lot of people, you're going to wonder, well, gosh, what can I be doing? And so I thought I would share just a few real quick ideas for you. First of all, today's presentation has been recorded. It's going to be both on DallasClimateAction.com and on our City of Dallas YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with your friends and neighbors, because I think there was a really robust conversation today and a lot of really great information. Our DallasClimateAction.com website includes all of the background on our climate plan. It includes our dashboard so that you can follow along on how we're doing as far as implementing the plan. And it includes records of all of our meetings with both the task force and our environmental committee. One of the things that I'm really proud to announce today is that our task force has been working extremely hard on the formation of an ongoing environmental commission. That ordinance is coming forward to council on the 28th of April. The recommendations from the task force are to have 15 members at large from the different council districts in Dallas, plus 8 technical experts to advise on the different sectors of the climate plan. Additionally, we are setting up a standing committee to address environmental health issues as they come up. And that was one of the things that both the public weighing in on the commission and our task force felt were critically important moving forward. So we're excited to see how that goes. The other thing, and this is for business folks that are tapped in today, Dallas was one of 8 cities internationally and one of 2 U.S. cities to be selected to the City Business Climate Alliance, formed by the C40 cities, the Carbon Disclosure Project, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We will be working with this alliance to partner with our local business community towards the goals in the CCAP. Please reach out and let me know if you have an interest in this program as well. Last but not least, thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to working with you as we care for our environment here in Dallas. And with that, I am closing us out. If you have questions or want to follow up, I would suggest Green Dallas at DallasCityHall.com, or there is a portal on DallasClimateAction.com where you can also reach out in that way. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think, what is it? Go forth and conquer, something like that. Take care. Have a great weekend, great rest of Earth Month. Thank you.